am told that it is 6 o'clock, so I'd like to call us to order. In accordance with South Carolina Code of Laws, 1985, Section 30-4-80-E, the following have been notified of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting: the Herald, the Charlotte Observer, CN2, and WRHI. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'd ask you please to join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You've all received a copy of the agenda. I will mention we have a slightly atypical schedule. We are in need of a brief executive session that we're going to do here towards the beginning of the meeting. Are there any corrections or adjustments?
No, ma'am.
All right, then that will stand as approved, but we do have some special recognition that we want to start off with. So I'll allow Dr. Epps to get over to the podium and begin that.
NAFO lacrosse.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to, well, let me back up by saying, for the public's sake, we'd like to honor, the board like to give certificates of recognition for state and national winners, and that's what we're the place at the agenda now. So do we have the coach of the lacrosse team out there? Could you come up and help us? We're going to honor the, well, we'll just let you tell us who we're going to honor and brag on them, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come speak. I'll keep it brief. You know, any good program, it starts at the top. Chris Chandler is our principal, great leader, big supporter at a lot of our games, cheering us on. To athletic director David Johnson, to my coaches who do a tremendous amount of work for all the time they give, to the players. It's community. We all win. I know we compete Fort Mill, Catawba, but at the end of the day, as long as the hardware comes here and not Wando, I think it's a great thing for us all. So thank you very much. Coaches and players that came up, you'll come up real quick for a quick picture. And Principal Chandler, you have to come too.
And bring that shiny helmet up here, too.
Jason, you want to bring the helmet? Put it on, Chase.
That's right.
Chase has somehow photobombed every picture that we've had this season.
I love it. Nice job, y'all.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all coming. You can hang around for the next 2 hours if you like. You know, if you've heard me during these recognition programs talk about school board before, you know what I'm about to say. We're blessed in Fort Mill and have been for several decades with strong school board members, folks who really do it for the right reasons. In Fort Mill, you have to do it for the right reasons because you don't get paid for doing it. So if you want to come over and do your public service without any pay, then you would be on the school board. But we always have a strong group of the pillars of the community, and that's true today. The School Boards Association, which we all belong to, has established in 1982. The Boardmanship Institute offers a year-long training curriculum focused on leadership skills for board members on state and national educational issues. Board members are recognized for reaching each of 6 levels. So first we're going to go present Mr. Anthony Bodie. He is recognized as level 1, certificate A, for 25 points. So Mr. Bodie, would you come forward? Stand here and wait around. We'll get both of you.
Okay.
And before I bring up Christy, just want to say that this is a prime example, this board, the success of this board, and and largely related to the success of the school district, I believe is the fact we are elected at large. All 7 of them have to care about every one of your children, not just the ones in their district. So I know there's efforts across the country and across the state to change that, and if you ever want to see a reason not to change it, look at the work of the Fort Mill School District. So I'll just throw that in. And now we'd like to honor Christy Spears for 5 consecutive years of less with 300 points. Ms. Spears.
While you're picturing, can I do a little elaboration? Okay, so the points are associated with the hours that we spend at conferences doing continuing education and training and whatnot. And then the association actually awards the levels based on the set points that you receive. Every year, we also have to submit to the state the number of hours that we've spent in continuing ed. So it's not license related like I have with real estate or like you all have for teaching and whatnot, but it is still very similar in that we are required to do continuing ed to get our next levels. So that's what that is, and it's getting adjusted this year.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are in need of a brief executive session to discuss the district joining a social media litigation with our attorney. So if I could get a motion, we will move into.
Motion to go into executive session.
And for those watching and for those in the room, sorry, we'll be out for a few minutes and then we'll be back. I get a motion to move back to
Motion
open
to
session?
return to open session?
Second.
So we are back in open session, and I apologize for those of you who had to wait for us. We don't normally have this, but it was something we couldn't prevent tonight. While in executive session, we discussed the district joining a social media litigation with our attorney, Dave Duff. We do have an action item. I think Dave is going to discuss with us a little bit about.
Yes, just, again, good evening, board members, and I'll be very brief. As many observers in the field have stated recently, and coincidentally, as the U.S. Surgeon General stated today in a brand new report, I'm actually just going to quote from the report that although there are benefits to social media, which we all recognize, the report says that, and I'll quote here, there are ample indicators that social media can also have profound risk of harm to the mental health and well-being of children and adolescents. And from my perspective, this problem of what I'm going to call social media addiction of many of our children, you know, the data again is 95% of teens report being on at least one social media platform, that more than a third of our children who are on the platform say that they're on social media almost constantly, and nearly 40% of children ages 8 to 12 use social media, even though the legal minimum requirements for most sites is 13. And we're experiencing a variety of mental health issues, everything from anxiety, depression, sleeping disorders, eating disorders, body image problems. So it's a real problem. And in executive session, you heard a little bit about the nature of the case, which has been instituted in the federal courts. Between 50 and 100 school districts, some of the largest ones in the country, have already agreed to join in as party plaintiffs. I strongly encourage and urge this board to join in. It's a contingent fee case. You don't, if we don't recover, then you will pay nothing in attorney's fees. You do not have to advance any costs from the general fund. So there's really no downside, and it's a very, very worthwhile and worthy cause to be involved in, aside from monetary recovery. So I urge you to retain the firm, the Wagstaff and Cartmel firm, that was the firm that represented you in the Jewel litigation, which occurred in the same federal court, and which, as you know, proved to be a very successful outcome for school districts. So I hope that you will seriously consider retaining the firm and giving them the authority to join this district into that litigation.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the district's attorney to retain the services of Wagstaff and Cartmel legal team to represent the district in joining the social media multi-district litigation now occurring in federal courts.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to, I can't repeat that one.
I know.
To retain the services of Wagstaff and Cartmel, the legal team to represent the district in joining the social media multi-district litigation now occurring in the federal court. Any further discussion?
Just like to say, yes, concur, we're seeing a lot of impact, and we're spending a lot of money that could be better spent educating, or we're educating and dealing with the ramifications of this sort of thing. So regardless of monetary benefit that may or may not happen, I think just out of principle, we really need to support this.
Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And we will keep everyone apprised as we know more about that case. Getting back to our previously scheduled agenda, let's see, we have public participation next. I do have a few cards. I think I have 4 cards, so we have a 15-minute window. Everybody can have about 4 minutes. And the first one I have, when your name is called, if you'll come up to the podium, state your name and address, and then you'll have your 4 minutes of time. I believe it is Peyton Tumblin.
Hi, everybody. Oh my gosh. My name is Peyton Tumblin. I am a high school student at Nation Forward. And do I need to say my home address? Okay, it's 791 Ivy Trail Way. I would like to talk to you all about the new proposed flex schedule. So I understand that you've heard plenty of opinions about this, and I'm sure that there's probably not a lot of changing anyone's mind at this point, but I do think that it is important for our board to hear students' voices on this. As a student, I've talked to many other people, many other kids about it, and I can just go ahead and tell you, respectfully, not very many of us are exactly fond of it. And I wasn't sure how much time that I would have, so things might get a little bit jumbled from here because now I just have points, so if I stumble over my words, I do apologize. But there are a lot of things that I think I completely understand why it's being proposed. There's teachers to consider, there's all of that to consider, and I do understand that, but I also think that you guys should hear out some of our student concerns. First of all, clubs. Of course, there are clubs that are huge, 450 students with our beta club. That's not something that's exactly going to die off. But there are clubs where you're not exactly going to get that participation at 8:40 in the morning. I am in Model UN. I'm in a few other things, but I love Model UN, so I'm going to talk about that. I was talking to one of my teachers today about Model UN and about the flex schedule, and I was asking her, I was like, so are we going to have to meet at 8:40? And she said yes, of course. And to be completely honest with you, students aren't going to want to show up for that. Students aren't going to want to show up for any club that starts at 8:40, quite frankly, if they have the option not to. And I think clubs are so important. I've met so many of my best friends through clubs. I've bonded with teachers through clubs. They are so important, not only to like students having fun, but they're important to mental health. They give students a little bit of a break throughout the day. So that is one thing to consider. It could definitely cause a little bit of die-off in school participation and different activities like that. But on the topic of mental health, I think that flex provides a great break for students throughout the day. And of course, there is lunch, and I understand that. But when you're going through 4 classes that are an hour and 30 minutes long, and the only break that you have is lunch, that's kind of tiring, especially on your students who are working so hard during those hour and 30 minutes in their AP and their honors classes. Even if you're not doing the work and the remediation during that flex time, it gives you a break, a brain break, which is so, so, so important. Students can't sit there and go through 6 hours of that instructional time with a 25-minute lunch break. 30 minutes? I'm not exactly sure how long it is, I won't lie to you. But it's going to take a toll on a lot of people. I also think that I kind of mentioned this with the clubs thing, but it gives people the opportunity to kind of bond with their teachers, which student-teacher relationships I personally find to be so important. And you get that time in flex to talk to your teachers, to talk about an assignment, to talk about all of this other stuff. And I am running out of time, and I know you could do that stuff in the morning, of course, but students aren't going to want to come in if they don't have to at 8:40. They aren't going to want to. As an honors and AP student, I can definitely say to you that since I'm not going to be required to be there because of a failing grade, I'm most likely not going to want to show up. So I've run out of time. Thank you so much, and I hope that you will take some of what I've said into consideration before finalizing your decision.
The next card I have is Jeannie Hubert.
I don't know that I
She's amazing. I bet you do great in Model UN. Hi guys, my name is Dr. Jeannie Haubert. I am Director of Research at the American Sociological Association. Can you hear me all right? We're a national professional group of about 10,000 sociologists who teach and conduct research on a wide variety of things, some of them including education and gender. And so I'm also an organizing member of the York County CAPE, Community Advocates for Public Education. And I'm a parent of 3 in the district. I forgot to say my address, 1060 Kings Bottom Drive. So I'm really just here to say thank you to you guys today for taking proactive measures in 2021 to keep trans children safe and enhance their sense of belonging in our schools. Recently, some parents in the district have been circulating some concerns on social media about 2021 recommendation by the State Department of Education that allows parents to change their child's names and pronouns on school documents in PowerSchool. And those social media critics are profoundly transphobic and position anything other than binary gender identification as harmful to our children, and also slander parents who support their trans children. And so I'm here to say that parents choose their children's names at birth, and they are entitled to choose their children's names in schools. And that's kind of an essence of parental choice matter. So I wanted to just express to you why having this forum matters, and thank you for having it. Trans children have unnervingly high rates of suicide. And so according to a 2022 national survey, more than half of trans youth report that they have seriously considered committing suicide in the past year. More than half. That's a lot. These youth are not inherently prone to suicide risk because of their gender identity, but rather they are placed at risk because of how they're mistreated and stigmatized in society. And schools have to be part of the solution, not part of the problem on that. Research is very clear that listening to children, supporting children, enhancing their sense of belonging is the most important thing that schools and parents can do in terms of suicide prevention. And so let me be clear that parental access to this forum is suicide prevention. And I wanted to thank you for taking that step. Wrapping up here, I just wanted to say that there are some studies that in-depth studies with children, non-binary children, that ask them what they need. They say that they need to be listened to, they need to be believed, they need schools that anticipate and recognize trans children in families where their identities are valued, and they want schools that ensure universal access to learning. And so thanks to you guys, our children have that support. Lastly, I just wanted to say, I've been an educator for 17 years, and so Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which every teacher learns about in their educational training, specifies that feeling safe and secure and accepted in schools is an essential prerequisite for learning and developing your full potential. And if children do not feel safe and secure, they cannot learn. So I just wanted to say that your job is a hard one, as any decision you make will bring critics. But as your motto says, children first. And so I wanted to thank you for prioritizing the safety, security, and belonging of all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my understanding that the next 2 want to come up together, so I've got 2, Laurel Hardy and Lily Sander.
(1702) Farintosh Drive.
1159 Wagner Avenue.
Good evening, Fort Mill School District Board, staff, families, and students. My name is Lily Sander,
And my name is Laurel Hardy.
and we are the founders and operators of Period, a local group of passionate youth dedicated to fighting period poverty and stigma.
We have recently expanded our mission into Fort Mill schools through bins filled with period products in the women's restrooms. We have received astonishing feedback from students and staff alike, highlighting the usefulness of having period products available at school. These period products relieve the burden of students who are financially struggling and those who forget their own supplies.
This infrastructure supports the learning of our students by keeping them in school and out of bathrooms and nurses' offices for an extended amount of time. This also relieves nurses of a great number of office visits. So, we ask you, Fort Mill School District, to truly put menstruating students first and invest in students' education and lives by supplying period products in bathrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, y'all buckle up because we've got a lot of agenda items to go through. Starting with an update on the elementary unencumbered time program, Mr. Ollinger and there she is, and Lindsay are not of it. I didn't see you at first.
Good evening. It's good to be here and to update you on our unencumbered lunchtime that we kind of piloted. So just for the benefit of everyone. So prior to spring break, the district had the idea to try to provide additional unencumbered time. As you know, the state law that takes effect for the next school year mandates that we have 30 minutes of unencumbered time for homeroom teachers and special education teachers. So we were kind of meeting the letter of that law through either having planning or after school time between dismissal and the teacher day ends. But we wanted to make sure that we provided this additional support to make sure they're kind of getting that time during the middle of the day. So as we were brainstorming again, I want to thank Ms. Lordo for partnering with Lindsay, who is the operations director for the Leroy Springs, and kind of partnering with our current Flyer staff that already has an after-school care program at all of our 11 elementary schools. So we're here to kind of talk about, the benefit of having this 6-week period is we've learned a lot. We have a recommendation, but do want to kind of talk to you about the positives and some of the challenges. But I do want to have Lindsay come up from her standpoint to share how it's going from the Flyers standpoint in Leroy Springs, and then I'll kind of bring you some information from the district. So Lindsay, if you want to talk about, we are very grateful for their partnership with this effort.
Good evening, board. Thanks for having me here. Quick history for those of you who aren't familiar. I know many of you are, but the Flyers program has actually been in the Fort Mill School District since 1989. Started at Fort Mill Elementary and has grown right along with all of y'all. In all 11 elementary schools. We try to serve as many children as we can in the space that we have to accommodate all the needs that there are. As you know, there are many, and try to do the best we can. So when we were reached out to by Ms. Lordo and Mr. Ollinger, we thought that this was really a great pair for our staff who already know the children, know the school, and a real opportunity to help support the educators in that unencumbered time that they need during the day. As Peter said, it was a little bit of a quick pivot for this past 6 weeks. We did the best we could. We do have approximately 80 staff members, all of which were brought on, hired aboard, knowing that their time frame would be from about 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. each afternoon. So this definitely changed that a little bit. But we did have about 25% of our staff that was able to pivot, 22 staff members that could help accommodate some of that lunch monitoring time. Unfortunately, we were not able to find folks. 2 staff members is what we tried to do at each location. We weren't able to meet that quite all the way in this 6 weeks, but we have developed a strategy to begin to hire for a secondary shift within the Flyers program to help cover those. So we are excited to get into the summer, look forward to hiring future folks for those shifts and really able to support this in the schools. But yeah, we're excited for this opportunity and to be able to continue to partner with you all. Any questions for me? I know you have a lot to cover. Want to keep it short? Great, thank you.
All right, and I do, as I go through some of the positives and challenges, I also just want to say we did learn and we kind of prepped staffs too that depending on what's going on that day, that unencumbered lunch may not happen. For example, would be when we have SE Ready testing. When you're using a lot of those people that are covering those classes, you're not able to support that Flyer staff to do it during that time. Or field day, for example. There's some of these special days where it just didn't work in the schedule and you had to kind of pivot. And our principals just made sure that the teachers did get a break during that day through the related arts, or they had it built into their schedule. So that's how we managed those days. So I wanted to preface with that. So the principals tried different things depending on one, their school layout played into effect. Some of the cafeterias, for example, when you're sending kids through serving lines, some of our cafeterias where we have walls, so like at Springfield Elementary, Fort Mill Elementary, Orchard Park, there's walls there, so it cuts down on visibility. You have to have some more people watching the two lines. That's a little bit different than Pleasant Knoll and Sugar Creek and Kingstown and River Trail, for example. Also, we took into account the size of the school. So we have some schools that are around 500, 550 students compared to some that are 900. So you need more people to staff those. So it kind of varied depending on which campus, how much additional staff was used to support the two Flyers employees, which have been great. So a lot of the extra staff that were pulled, again, depending on the school, some used interventionists, some used lead teachers, literacy coaches, all three administrators, some used office staff. So the principals came up and made their schedules that worked with those particular schoolmaster schedules. And like we told them, don't go making major changes to your master schedule for the last 6 weeks of school. That didn't happen. So they kind of worked within the confinements of the restraints of that current master schedule. So with that, and with all those employees that I just mentioned, depending on the school, one of the issues we ran into was that we don't get subs for those employees when those particular employees are out. So if they're out for different things, there's no one to cover them. That means you extend the schedule for those employee groups that you were using to cover that. In addition to a lot of those same employee groups, we would use those people if we're having a sub shortage. Those folks are pulled to go cover classes, and Fridays in May are tough for that. So. But we made a lot of great efforts. We learned a lot, and Lindsay and I have talked. We already have a meeting set up this summer. Like she mentioned, I know they're planning to go out for further recruitment for employees on their end. So we're going to be able to kind of revise and do some things a little bit different. But I know our homeroom teachers loved it. It was great. So it's been a great effort to give them that extra time so they would have lunch off. So we feel like that's been beneficial. But the two biggest challenges overall were, again, just when you have those staff members that are helping cover are out and they don't have subs or they're being pulled, we were short. So then you're pulling those employees away from other responsibilities to cover. In some cases, to make these schedules work, we did have some intervention groups that had to be canceled to help cover lunch. So that was one of the unintended consequences for this. So I met with the principals last week. We want to try to continue to provide this, and we think we've come up with a good solution, a tweak, if you will, to start next school year. And as we continue to work and grow the program, we can always revisit. Nothing's set in stone, but kind of the tweak that we have kind of come up with, and we had a couple of schools that piloted this prior to this change. So we were kind of thinking what we would do is have fully covered lunch 3 days a week. And the other 2 days a week, we would do a hybrid. So we would have a fraction or half of the grade level go to lunch. With the support of the Flyer staff, they could maintain that coverage for the cafeteria. And if you cover lunch that day, you have recess off that day. And then so the second day of that week, it'd be the other half. So you would still get 4 days a week, no lunch coverage, duty free, but you would have either recess or recess that other day. So you're going to have that extra additional break every day, and start the year like that, and then continue to look and try to grow that program. And we can always pivot. You know, some schools have situations where they can organize parent groups to come in and cover lunch. So it could be some weeks we can cover all that additional day. You know, so we'll continue to try to look at things, but kind of this hybrid program or this idea of going to 3 full and the hybrid for 2, if you will, we feel like we'd be able to get a lot of that intervention groups back where they are and alleviate some of the sub concerns when we have absences. So again, and like Lindsay said, we are appreciative. It was kind of a whirlwind to kind of get it started, learned a lot, got a lot of great things in place. We feel like we can kind of start strong for sure the beginning of the next school year to kind of pull this off. And I have more details if you want them. So that's kind of the spiel of summer.
You said 3 and 2, a hybrid.
Yes.
To the classroom teacher, though, it's still a 30-minute break.
Correct.
5 days.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So you would have everybody through the week would have 4 days off from lunch, but they would have 1 day where half of them or a fraction of them could cover. Again, depending on your school size, you may not need. So if you have a grade level of 8, you may not need 4. You might cover that with 3 plus the 2 flex.
It meets the state law for that classroom teacher.
Correct. they're either going to they'd get recess on the day that they did not have lunch.
So certainly the spirit of what we're trying to do is there.
Correct.
But it also does meet the letter of the law that's required.
Absolutely.
What about the days that you mentioned, the field days, the sub-shortage days, those kind of things? Do we have a plan that also meets the not just the spirit, but the letter of I know there's some exceptions
Yeah.
in the law, but I don't remember what all they are.
So what we do, and again, the letter of the law, we would meet with either planning, honestly, or the time from dismissal to the end. But they said the intent was for the middle of the day, so that's what we're really trying to work on. So, for example, field day is planned months out in advance. So principals build in with their PE teachers are usually the ones that schedule that. We'll make sure those teachers get a break during that day. For example, testing, that's another thing that gets scheduled out months in advance. So you just make sure that you don't plan a PLC meeting for those grade levels on that day, and that you just don't have any parent conference IEP meetings during planning that day. So those big events where you wouldn't cover it are events that are well planned out. And even with our early dismissal days where they do get 2 hours, but typically you're not having a PLC meeting that day too, so they're still getting time during that day as well. So those events in particular are scheduled way in ahead of time that we can arrange for that. And say, for example, if we go to school, we haven't had it in like 2 years, but we have snow and we're sending people home at 10 a.m., that's unavoidable and that's in the law. So we'd be good there.
I'm thrilled that it's working and you have a plan for it to be more permanent.
Yeah, it's worked really well. We just feel like this tweak would be able to we can get the best of everything that we have given some of the constraints.
Right?
Yes, and
That's awesome.
yes, and again, I just want to thank Lindsay and Leroy Springs. They've been great to work with, and like I said, we're going to meet this summer and further develop some things. We're going to once they get their full staff in, we'll be meeting with them as a whole, and then again, when they're assigned to their schools, they'll be meeting with that school admin because again, each campus is a little bit different, expectations are a little bit different, and why already crazy we're talking about next school year, but another thing, just so y'all know, like that first week of school, we make sure they have their planning out, but we would need teachers those first few days in the cafeteria to set expectations, procedures, and kind of that's all hands on deck when we're dealing with 5 to 10-year-olds. So that'll be the plan there. So
Excellent. Thank you.
all right,
Thank you very much.
thanks, appreciate it.
All right, for 6.02, we've got discussion of the next year's general fund budget with Ms. Lordo.
Okay, good evening. Tonight we are going to continue our discussion of the budget, and primarily the purpose tonight is for you to ask questions. After you saw our proposal at the May 9th meeting, the state budget is still in process. I think we've all read. But as I reported at the last meeting, we do not expect any significant education funding changes in the state budget. So we are still comfortable with moving forward with our proposed plan for your consideration. I'm going to start by just recapping a couple of the highlights from the details that we presented at the last meeting, and then I'll open it up for your questions. The proposed 2023-2024 budget is $216,479,435. This is an increase of approximately $23.5 million over our current year budget, and it will accommodate and is based on a student enrollment projection of 18,696 students for next year. As I stated last time, probably the most important fact on here is that salaries and fringe or positions in the district account for approximately 89% of the total budget. This is based on the number of people staffing that we need for next year, and that was our primary highest priority in the plan. The next highest item you can see covers our operations and maintenance of 20 school sites plus the district office and the maintenance transportation center, and that that's about 6.2. So when you add the salary fringe cost and the operational cost, that's 95% of the total budget. So the remaining budget is only about 5%. You have heard me speak numerous times about the new education funding model and how it has been harmful to our district. We continue to be disappointed that there's been no improvement in the distribution, specifically for faster growing, lower poverty districts like ours. We are in year two will be in year two of the new education funding model. And once again, this budget plan does include a contingency transfer of $3,350,000. I want to touch on the millage rate. This plan does require 30 mills. It's once again based on the consumer price index of 8%, the highest we have seen in many, many years, and our population growth of 5.27. You always ask me, are we leaving any millage on the table, and what's the maximum? And I did want to share tonight, just to reiterate, that the state law, Section 6(1)(3)20, does allow school districts or governmental entities to go back and add millage that they have not previously imposed for the prior 3 years. I have seen, and you may have too, several districts have already decided to do that in their budget plan just because of what is going on with state funding, because of the differences in state funding. So I just wanted to give you a quick recap of that. Our 30 mills is our current year CPI growth, but our 2022 tax year millage, if you remember and you were on the board, you could have passed 21 mills based on CPI and growth last year, and you imposed only 17 mills. So we do have 4 mills still left on the table that would not be in this plan as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that for you as you hear other districts are adding some of their 3-year look back.
And last year was that reassessment year, correct?
Reassessment was in 2021.
So that was 2 years ago.
So we did capture all millage up through reassessment. And then the next year was this. So, yeah. So we do not have any for the 2 previous years, just last year, but great question. As you remember from the last meeting, I went through the details of our expenditure categories. Category 1 are our items that we consider the most critical. These are things that I say are either mandated, such as teacher salary step. We've had to shift positions from ESSER that will, our ESSER funding, ESSER 2 funding will expire in September. And then we've also had to deal with the state, once again, did some roll-up categories of some of their previously funded special revenue funds up into the new education funding formula, and we have positions that are paid out of those funds. We have technology contracts, we have utility, cleaning, insurance, maintenance type things. These are our, what I like to call, cash out the door that we need to account for. Now, one item on here, we have included as an administration the $2,500 salary increase for teachers. That is not mandated by the state because we already meet the minimum requirement of a starting salary. The new state minimum scale would be $42,500. Since we already start our teachers higher than that, we would not have to do the $2,500. But as an administration, we feel like that is a Category 1 funding priority item. We've also included the 5% cost of living for all of our other staff, our support admin, and bus drivers will receive a state-mandated 25% increase on the state bus driver scale next year. That's also in Category 1. To fund Category 1, that would take 17 mills for next year.
And you've also got included the.
Joe, sorry.
You've also got included the funding to cover the 30 minutes of unencumbered time that we were just talking about.
Correct.
Given what we just discussed, is this number still sufficient?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. The next items are our Category 2, 3, and 4. Our Category 2, our next highest priority item that we are proposing is to add an additional $800 for our teacher salary scale to each cell. That would bring our starting teacher salary to $47,000. So it would be a total increase of $3,300 for our teachers, as well as some other employee groups that are paid on the teacher salary schedule. That line item also includes adding a 26th step. We would like to move forward like some other districts are doing. The districts who are currently in the top 5 paying districts for teacher pay in the state, they all have steps above 25. And so we would like to move in a direction of adding a step a year up to 30 steps. So this would add the 26th step to our teacher salary schedule as well. Category 2 also adds our need for special ed classroom teachers, inclusion resource, and then our special ed assistants needed. To fund Category 2 is an additional 8 mills. So that brings us to 25 mills for Category 1 and 2. Then Category 3 is our extracurricular stipends that all of our principals requested additional funding to compensate their teachers for after-school clubs, other activities they do with our students. And this would, once again, elementary, they currently only have $2,000. So this would double their amount to $4,000. Middle school, this would add an additional $1,500 per middle school. And then the high schools requested $10,000. That would bring them to a total of $17,500. The other couple items there, ESOL, they had requested initially 3 teachers. This is 1 teacher, and then I put 1 teacher in Category 4. And then 2 positions. As you know, we are consolidating our middle and high school alternative program, and there are many needs there, but we have prioritized an additional mental health counselor just for our alternative program, as well as 2 special ed teachers. To fund Category 3 would be an additional 1 mill. That takes us to 26 mills. Category 4 are some of our curriculum items, 2 additional curriculum coordinators, continuing with adding a third assistant principal at the middle school level. We currently have 2 middle schools. This would add an additional middle school principal, assistant principal at Forest Creek, because they will be over the projected number of students that we're not comfortable with just having 2. And then for several years, we've seen the high schools request the PLC testing specialist position to be help and be focused on with testing. I think this is the 3rd year I've seen that request from the high school principals. The other items are some of the department needs and then some of the curriculum needs. These curriculum line items are things that I've sort of moved around and I have funded where I could, meaning I would fund out of some state aid funding. Then I moved it to some of these to ESSER one year, and these things just don't have a permanent recurring revenue home. So if you recall from last time, and we're going to talk about later tonight, the year-end transfer, I've split some of these curriculum needs. None of these items are new things. It's just finding a place to fund it for next year. Because we no longer have any of the other state aid to classrooms. It's all rolled into the new funding formula for going forward. So to fund Category 4, that's an additional 4 mills, and that brings us to the total of 30 mills, which is our proposed plan for the budget next year. Those were the items that I wanted to highlight, and now I'm going to open it up for your questions after your consideration and review from the rollout that we did at the last meeting.
What questions do you guys have?
I have a couple.
Okay.
And first of all, I'm speaking for Joe, but he'll correct me if I'm wrong. This was a lot to take in and understand. And so I just want to say thank you because that's a
Sure.
lot of work you put into it. But I want to make sure I understand what I'm possibly voting on.
Okay.
So in category 1, salary step for all employees, that is only through employees on the state scale. Is that correct? So only
No.
through year 25.
That is only through year 25, correct. But it's also the step on the other scales, like the bus driver scales, the cafeteria scales,
Okay.
the support scales as well.
But if you're certified,
Correct.
you would not get that.
If we do not add the 26th step,
Right, which
Yes.
is category 2.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then in category 1, 2,500 salary increase for teachers. That one is no matter how many years.
Correct.
Okay, so old gray-haired teacher maybe didn't get a step, but is looking
Correct.
at 2,500.
Because that 25th step would be increased 2,500.
Okay.
So they would get the 2,500, but not any additional step.
Okay, and then if we went to category 2, every
Yes.
certified person would get the 2,500 and the extra 800?
Correct.
Okay, excellent.
And
I think
in
that's
addition
great
to every
news.
certified person, there are a few other employee groups paid on that scale, such as nurses, school
Right.
psychologists,
And we've been hearing
speech.
from some of them some
Correct.
concerns. but
Correct.
This is,
They're also, we
Included.
say the teachers, and it's the teacher pay scale, but we do have some other employee groups, professional employee groups that are paid on the teacher pay scale.
okay. And then I think this is my last one for now. The very last item in category 4 is STAR testing. And so I'm just curious, like, if we did not fund that, what would we wouldn't have data points for elementary other than their Fountas and Pinnell?
Well, what I would propose before we did not do that at all, because I know that everyone benefits from this data, is I would probably shift it and add it to a year-end transfer amount.
Okay, so
If we
that's
had
what
an
you're-
additional opportunity for that.
You're just like.
I'm just moving it around.
Okay, okay,
At this point, curriculum is not willing to, they gave up a few things, but these are the things they were not willing to give up,
got
if
it,
that makes sense.
got it. And
Yes.
if we do category 1 and category 2, our beginning novice teachers are moving from 43,700 to 47,000.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
The only question that I have is, does the administration have a category 5 that would include those 4 mills that you were talking about that are on the table?
We do not, but we could develop that out of the master summary that I shared with you that had $26 million of requests. I believe that's the number. I'm going off the top of my head. $26 million of requests. We could easily come up with a category 5. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I got about 9 to 12 questions. You may need some stakeholders to help on some
I
of the
might need some
questions.
help. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to refer back to budget goals in the summary, I'll call it. And there's 5 bullet points that you have. One of the bullet points, which is bullet point 2, says continue recruit and retain staff in all service areas by adjusting salary schedules to remain competitive. Can you elaborate on that and the why? Why?
Sure. So we felt like this year our main focus was to try to do as much as we could for current employees before we started adding additional positions. Now, as you see, we had committed to some teachers early on because of projected enrollment, and that's different, and we're having to move some positions from other funds. But we felt like this was a very important year because of not only you've heard so much about teacher shortage in South Carolina and nationally, that we felt like this was a very important year to focus on doing what we could for current employees and trying to stay competitive with our salary rates. And not only teachers, but we're just continuing to see the effects of a declining workforce with all other areas, with cafeteria, with bus drivers, with support personnel, with instructional assistants in the classroom. And that's why we felt like it was so important this year. We wanted to match the 5% cost of living that the state was doing for all other state employees. We wanted to do that as well for our other employee groups for that reason. And that was our main focus with our leadership team as we discussed the budget and what we are proposing for you to consider for next year.
Okay. Maintain reasonable class sizes at all levels. Please elaborate on that.
Okay, I'm gonna get some help from some others that work with that more than I do. Right.
So you're just asking in general what maintain good class sizes? So the state actually has a law, state regulations on class sizes. We've always prided ourselves in Fort Mill on keeping the class sizes low. That's one thing we do to recruit and retain the teachers that we have. I will say that, you know, we've kept them very low, you know, for I would say we could compete with about anybody in the state. Now, this year, because of funding, obviously, they are going to have to go up a little, but I still think that we are in a position where we can keep our class sizes pretty low and compete across the state level. Now, the numbers, those 25 and a half teachers that we put in category 1, without those, we are not comfortable with the class sizes that we would have if we did not have those teachers, if that makes sense. So, you know, we all talk and we said those 25 and a half are something that we definitely need to keep those class sizes at a comfortable level and to help our teachers. You know, we feel that low class sizes helps our teachers, but also helps our students with student achievement. So
Perfect. Thank you. That's good.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I know Dr. Waitsness couldn't be here tonight. We historically would look at school by school, grade by grade, class by class. 6th grade has an average of 18 at this school and 19 at that school. And so that it's continued to be a focus. We just haven't been looking at it as much here because it's been kept in check. But I would say, you know, we've been in the high teens to low 20s for the most part. Occasionally you'll have a 4th or 5th grade that'll have 24 or 25, but that's the outlier
Right.
because of growth, usually 3/4 of the way through the year, right? So that's kind of the ballpark
Correct.
range of what I remember seeing whenever we look at those.
And early childhood, that 1st and 2nd grade, kindergarten's a little different because they have an assistant.
Right.
We've kept those at 20, at least 20 or lower. You know, you get into 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you might go up to like 23. You'll see some of those at the last year we did go up in certain schools because we were just a lot of growth. Springfield Elementary was one of them, Gold Hill Elementary. So, and then you get to the middle school and high school, you know, again, we keep those class sizes pretty low as well. And we're very fortunate to do that. Now they might creep up just a little, but we feel comfortable with those 25 and a half teachers and the numbers that we have going into the summer before we see a lot of growth. So,
But you're already getting some emails from principals
Correct.
about they're watching these things.
Yep. And principals will email me and they'll say, hey, look at my 4th grade, it's getting high, and we'll monitor that. And if it gets too high, then we'll come back and ask for another teacher or figure something out.
Okay.
Yep.
So based on what you presented regarding the salaries and fringes, we're about 88.8% of the total budget that you are suggesting or proposing.
Correct.
So we're just shy of $2 million on the per pupil school allocations. Why is that important?
So the per pupil school allocations on that slide, that's what I call the school budgets. So each school principal or school administration is allocated $100 per projected enrollment for next year, and they develop their school budget that they then allocate out to their teachers. Some of them do it by classroom, some of it do it by content, some do it by grade level. That covers supplies for their school, that covers things they need in their office, that covers some professional development for their teachers as well, but that is their school budget for next year. We do look at that at the 45th day, and if we have any schools that have what I call a significant change, now if they go down in enrollment or their enrollment has not met that level that we allocated funds, we don't take money away. But if they have a significant increase in enrollment, maybe a new neighborhood came on quicker than we expected over the summer, we will make an adjustment on their funding based on that 45th day. And typically, we may have one or two schools that are affected by that each year. But that is their school budget.
Can I ask, interject a question
Yes.
just on that specific topic right there? Has there been consideration, because, and I know I've asked this, I think almost every year, but consideration to supplement schools with different socioeconomic statuses that would have a higher amount in their general budget to offset the costs that they're not getting as a waiver in their student activity fees?
Correct. We have had discussion about that. We aren't currently doing that, but I think that is a great topic to consider. If we have any available funding, especially after that 45th day, if I have any available funding on that line item, we certainly should consider that.
And you're talking about the $100 activity fee for a sport or an extracurricular?
So the registration fee.
Oh, you're talking about the $35.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a waiver given to students on free and reduced lunch. So a school with a higher free and reduced lunch population is getting less in their activity
Yes.
fund, which is part of their budget as well,
Yes.
Than a school with a
That
lower.
doesn't have as much
Yeah.
free and reduced.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes. And we generally have 2 or 3 schools who have asked us about that before. So we can
are those
certainly look at
schools
that.
Often Title IX? I'm
Title.
Sorry, Title I?
Yes.
Because there are additional dollars
Yes.
for that as well.
Yeah.
Additional things, not necessarily
Some,
dollars. Yep.
some,
But Title I is generally, and Mr. Olinger, that's generally tied to people. Again, that's tied to positions. Very, yeah.
It is a little bit for professional development and for curriculum resources.
Mm-hmm.
But the salary and fringe, we employ 3 people out of those funds, and that's the vast majority.
And for those who may not have heard, it's mainly people, and you said, I think, three resources.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Good point.
But thank you for reminding us about that. We will have some discussion about that as well.
Okay. Going to the other category, so we're about $4.4 million that you're suggesting. Under that other, under the other, you have as activity buses, department school, resource officers. Can you give a 30,000-foot view on that,
sure.
please?
Let me pull out detail on that. So other is going to include, you mentioned activity buses. In the budget, this includes about $346,000 that it cost us to operate our buses each year. Over and above what we do charge out mileage and a per driver rate, but this is over and above that, what we supplement out of the general fund for running our activity buses. It also includes approximately $1.2 million for middle school and high school athletics and band, what you allocate out of the budget for those programs to cover. This supplements the $100 fee to cover the coaching stipends and some transportation for their league games. It also covers school resource officers. That's about $1.3 million that we put towards security that covers our school resource officers. That is with local law enforcement agencies as well as our contract with Defender for our elementary schools. And then it covers about $450,000 of various what I call department curriculum items that they use for summer lunch and learn is a great example. GT materials, we use it for strategic planning, some of the Teacher of the Year programs that we do and things like that. So it's a combination of all those things into that number.
Perfect, thank
And
you.
you mentioned SROs. I keep reading in clippings and headlines about the state wanting to make sure we have a resource officer in every school. That's not funded, though?
We can't, and you might need to help me with this, right? There is more state funding available than local law enforcement agencies across the state can find officers. So we even here would have an opportunity for additional state funding, but they cannot find the officers.
Well, and the other thing that I recall of that, though, is there were strings attached, shocking. There were strings attached that it was only for new resource officer positions. So where we have,
Or we've already funded them. It's
and
not.
we're funding
Correct.
them, that's all on us. We're not getting
Yes.
anything extra because of. So it's,
Yes.
it's incredibly short-sighted with what it really is
Yeah.
and
No,
is
come on in,
available.
Please.
So a perfect example of that is Forest Creek Middle in our elementary schools. I mean, we can apply for a grant for more SROs in our elementary schools. The problem is they don't have the SROs to even fund what we already have. So Forest Creek Middle School was a new school. When we build a new school, we can apply for that grant funding for those new middle schools.
New,
Yep.
new FTE.
Yep.
We need to build more schools.
Right.
Well, we need to find more police officers, just like teachers. I mean, they're, yeah.
Like no one that should come back, but you know.
Okay. Now I'm going to go to the summary that you gave us. In this summary, it depicts things that didn't make the cut and things that did, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you call this a
Correct.
master summary, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so going to go to, I saw one that did not make the cut, which was the registration and residency interventionist. Can you describe that role as it is today, please?
I'm going to ask. It's in Grace Department.
All right. I win best supporting role tonight, I think, at the board meeting. Yeah. So currently we have Megan Gray in that role. She's our attendance and residency interventionist. And I will tell you, I think I said this last board meeting, I think when she was hired, we were right under 11,000 students or right at it. So a lot has come to light, and we've had more responsibilities for that job. She does everything that a social worker would do in a lot of districts. This includes homeless, our McKinney-Vento. Y'all might not know this, but we have 60 homeless students this year, according to McKinney-Vento. So that's a lot of students that she is helping, assisting, getting them registered in the right school, trying to find them places to stay, those types of things. She refers students to community agencies as needed. She's doing foster care support. She does no-show. She's looking for students that don't show up for school those first 10 days. She goes and tracks them down. She works with families often now in response to like a crisis. So it's kind of a reactive type of response. It would be awesome if she could be more proactive in that response. She would tell you that. But really right now she doesn't have the time with also all of the attendance things she does. She supports all of our schools with their attendance, tracking students down that are missing days. She does attendance intervention plans with those students. The residency piece, she is tracking down students that don't live in Fort Mill, but say they live in Fort Mill, or that their leases have expired or their homes have sold. But what they're doing is they're registering for school and then they're moving, but they're keeping that address. So she tracks all of those students down. She does, I'm just looking at this right now. She works with our Power School liaisons at every school, 20 Power School liaisons. She also assists them in helping new Power School liaisons. And then she also does a lot of our Spanish-speaking families. Schools will call her. She's fluent in Spanish, so she meets with them. She does our central. We have a central registrar, but she assists our central registrar and assists our high school registrars in all their needs, making sure they have the right documentation. I could keep going, but yeah.
Yes, enough said, yes.
But
Got
that's
it.
why the district social worker
Correct.
is on category 4.
So that's my next question. Yes, so can you differentiate the difference between the district social worker versus?
So what the social worker will do is really take a lot of that off of Megan so that she can put more emphasis on the attendance and residency piece. So the social worker will do a lot of that McKinney-Vento, the homeless students. she'll be he or she, the social worker, will be referring the community agencies for assistance, referring those families to community agencies. She'll be doing the foster care support. She'll be doing the no-show support. She'll be going and meeting with families, being a liaison between the school and the family to help create that relationship, especially those families that could be homeless, could be in poverty, those types of things, are not coming to school. So that social worker will do a lot of those things that Megan's currently doing in addition to the attendance and residency.
Okay. Last one pertaining, well, there may be two more pertaining to you, Greg.
Okay.
One
No
more.
problem.
So this is the athletic director,
Mhm.
district athletic director position that did not make the cut.
Okay.
I've attended more than 200 sporting events the last 2 years. And based on the data you gave last year, and I'm going to use the participation from 2022, but I'm going to use this year's
Okay.
high school attendance. So 2,206 students participated last year.
In
This
high
year-
schools?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes, correct, in high schools. 5,348, that's the total between the three schools,
Mhm.
attendance.
Yep.
So we're talking about 41% participation rate, and that's huge. And it didn't make the cut.
Yep.
I don't need to know why, but it's just something, it's an observation that I have and so I just want to
Yeah.
call that out and say, I noticed that, knowing how I believe that's a very important
Right.
part and big help that could be to you and your department.
Yep. Thank you.
Next one here is number 8, which is, this did not make the cut, the additional educator effectiveness coach. How would we describe the impact of that position?
So we currently have only one person in that position, Jessica Calloway. And this is in the HR, educational effectiveness area. But from what I understand about it, and I have limited knowledge, but what Jessica does is she develops a relationship with the induction teachers. She helps mentor them. She helps them look at analyzing their classroom practices, their student work, and then looking at instructional development of our induction teachers. I will tell you that I've had a follow-up conversation with HR, and this could be something that could be on that category 5, because it's very important to Ms. McGarity, and we've had a follow-up conversation about that particular position since we developed our plan. Jessica also, they said, really kind of builds that camaraderie, that community among those new induction teachers as well. So it's been a very successful program. That's why they very much would like to add another person working with those induction teachers next year.
Okay, perfect. And last question, and this was not on here, but I deal with K through 12s on a daily basis, and the one topic that's a sensitive topic is cybersecurity. How often are we investing in cybersecurity?
We invest annually. And Mr. Spittle is not here this evening, but from some of the information that I received, we spend about $211,000 specifically on cybersecurity because it's so critical. We basically have a firewall that sits between our servers and the internet. So we have a software vendor we pay for that firewall portion. We also have 400 additional workstations where we have clients installed for additional security, like the finance department, the HR department, Power School staff at each school will have additional security on their particular workstations due to the critical nature of the data that is going through their workstations. We do multi-factor authentication now, as well as we do a lot of phishing training. And I'll tell you from experience, it is so embarrassing when you get those little emails.
Yep.
And I think we've all done that at some point, and you click on something, and then you get the little thing that says, oops, no, you have to do additional training. And so I personally have had to go to Mr. Spittle about that, but it's very effective. So they send these emails out every so often to us, but it really keeps you thinking about what you're clicking on as well. But we have a very large investment in cybersecurity here. They also do, I think this is very interesting, they do something, and I've heard them speak about this, tabletop scenarios about once a year where they really go in as if someone was going to get into our system and look at do they have their plan actually tight and ready to go. If that happens, they can react very quickly, because I think that certainly is so critical in if you have a plan and you know the steps you're going to take if that happens. But we spend about $200,000 a year on these cybersecurity measures for the district. Yeah, sure.
Other questions?
Other questions?
Yeah. All right, so just kind of being out in the community, talking about these things, just want to raise up some concerns, speaking with some small business owners. All of these things, I literally personally can't see anything that's not justified here. The bottom line is we are talking over $10 million on
New tax revenue.
on tax revenue.
Correct.
Yeah. And if we add the extra meals, we're looking at over 11. So I've kind of had this kind of conversation come up, and I just want to kind of I want to hand this to you just for clarity for everyone. I've heard things like, hey, why can't we offset any of this with our reserve funds? Could you speak to what our reserve funds policies are? Sure. Could you also speak a little about fee in lieu? Because when we say small business, like, we're not talking about like LPL. Like, none of their money is coming to us. Like, they pay a fee in lieu.
Not none.
Okay, not none, but it's on our sheet that Leanne gave me. If you could just kind of speak, if you just speak a little bit to that, and do we have any reoccurring funds that would also, if we did supplement with a reserve fund, do we have any reoccurring funds that could backfill with?
Okay. So the sheet you're referring to is in our audit report, just for the benefit of everyone and those watching. It is in our note disclosures. I don't know the page number, but it is a footnote in our audit report that basically lists out every commercial entity that has a current fee in lieu agreement. And it shows the amount the difference in what we would collect.
Correct, yes.
If they were paying at their full assessment, full millage, versus what their negotiated fee in lieu amount for taxes is. And I believe the current amount in the audit report for last June was about a little over $9 million, between $9 and $10 million. But we do have, you have a board policy, we have a district financial policy on fund balance that requires 2 months of operating expenditures. So it's 2 months of the next year's budgeted expenditures, so that's 16%. That is in accordance with best accounting practices for government entities in particular. And just to kind of recap, as you hear me say when I do the monthly board reports, those periods from August through November, that is when we do not have the majority of taxes coming in, and we are dependent on fund balance for cash flow. So that can range from anywhere from like 2.7 million in August to a high of like 15 million that we're using in October, November. If we did not have sufficient fund balance for that cash flow, we would have to go out and borrow. It's called a tax anticipation note, a TAN. It's a loan. We would have to go out and borrow funding and have to pay interest on that to really meet the monthly expenditures, meet the monthly payroll, meet the weekly accounts payable during those weeks until taxes really started coming in into December. That's why that's really important. For next year's budget, at June 30th, I'm estimating a fund balance of about $41.5 million. To meet this 16% requirement for the new budget year, we need $36 million. So that only leaves us, we only have an excess of about 5.5 mathematically, the difference between the 16% and what we're going to need for this budget plan to meet the board policy requirement of the 2 months. We only have about 5.5. I'm never going to recommend that we use more non-recurring revenue than we need to for recurring expenditures. We're already using $3.3 million in this plan, the contingency transfer, and we know that, and we know that we've got to remove that at some point. I didn't think this was the year to do that with all the ESSER positions that we had to transfer over, and also with the roll-up of some of those other state revenue categories, and then what we wanted to propose on teacher salaries. So I'm comfortable bringing in the 3.3, but that is non-recurring, and that pot of money is going to go away. I would not be comfortable with trying to come up with a plan to have $10 million in addition to that in this budget that we would have to make up in some future year. The other thing about fund balance or reserve that's so important is it really speaks to, I think, the financial stability of your district, and it's very important when you go out, I've mentioned, to the bond market, and we do this frequently here. We sell bonds. When I have these ratings calls with Moody's and Standard & Poor's in New York, they want to know, what is our fund balance? Is it stable from the prior year? What is the plan for that current year? What is the plan for the next budget year? How does the school board feel about that? How does the district administrative staff feel about that? So it goes into their consideration of our ratings for bond issues as well, fund balance. It's also really important, the State Department now looks at that, and they look at districts and they look to see that you are maintaining an adequate fund balance. If you are not, you could potentially be put on fiscal watch or fiscal warning, and we've heard of that happening. So there's a lot of different reasons why that's really important, but probably the most important is just cash flow. And also just if something happens at the state level, you have to have some funding so that you're not in a situation where you have to significantly change your budget plan for that year when you've got people hired, you've got classes determined. We would not want to have to react mid-year and significantly reduce our staff because of any changes. And you've heard me say many times about my concern about the new state education funding model. I finally did receive, just the end of last week, so I haven't had a lot of time to truly analyze this. I did receive the detail of the 135-day numbers when the state updated the allocations. So I've received it by district, and I'll just share real quick. Once again, 41 districts have had their funding reduced from the 45th day to the 135th day.
Over half.
41 districts.
More than 50% of the school districts.
They reduced their funding. And I'm still doing a lot of analysis on this, but I thought that was very interesting. And it ranges anywhere from a reduction of 7,000 up to a reduction of 1.3 million. There were, once again, a handful of districts who gained students or gained weighted pupils, because remember the weighting is different now. They gained weighted pupils, but they once again lost money. Does not make any sense. So we're still seeing these trends. Thank goodness we were in the black. So I'm just happy when I see that. We gained about 100,000 because we really looked at our weighted pupils. We did a lot of work to make sure we accounted for every student and every weighting that we could. But even, I'll give you a quick example. Greenville, the largest school district in the state, they increased their weighted pupils 117. They lost 377,000. This is after they had already lost millions going from last year to the 45th day. So it very much is a concern among the state CFOs right now, what is going on with the new funding formula. And just another quick tidbit on the hold harmless. We're now down to, in the projections for next year, there's only 3 of us. There's only 3 districts now in the hold harmless: Fort Mill, Charleston, and I believe one of the Barnwell districts, which doesn't really make any sense. But we went from 5.1 million down to 2.9 million. So we lost an additional 2.2 million, which is 6.5 mils in the projections for next year. So I think that's why we're seeing so many districts that are having to react to this and probably increase their local millage more than they ever have before.
And I've been reading the clippings, and those who have been doing their budgets a couple weeks ahead of us, they're all up in the teens and 20s
Yes,
as well.
they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they've traditionally been single.
For the ones that have
Correct.
been either single digits or flat year over year. and I
Correct.
suspect that's why it's the formula is not
I agree.
matching.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that kind of clarifies it for those people that were kind of wondering those things. You said it way
Sure.
better,
Does that
way better
help?
than I
Okay.
can. So yeah, and to speak to that fiscal watch, we literally have a neighboring district who is under that right now. Correct?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. I don't want to be there, so.
No, absolutely not.
Other questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you up next?
I am.
Oh, you are?
Or-
Okay.
yes.
You are.
Oh,
Now you have a
okay.
first reading of a
I do.
board policy, okay?
Okay, so to sum up the budget, we will have the public hearing on June the 6th. We have already advertised in the newspaper, and then we will have it on the agenda for approval. But once again, if you have any questions prior to that meeting, I would be glad to help you with any or provide any additional information. So the first policy that I have, oh, did we skip one? I think I had the
The first one was supposed to be DID.
yes. Okay, inventories. Okay, this is truly just an accounting issue, and I'm going to try to explain this one to you. When we have to count something as a fixed asset and set it up for depreciation, we currently have a threshold of $5,000 per item. The Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, has come out with an implementation guide that they now are saying that a government should capitalize assets whose individual acquisition costs are less than the threshold, which our threshold is $5,000, or if a group of assets in the aggregate is significant. And I heard David Phillips and Larry Finney speak on this at a recent accounting update that I attended, and they are recommending that districts update their fixed asset policy. And we are electing to add that language and say that our aggregate amount of purchases, and this is primarily things like iPad purchases. It could be kitchen equipment, but specifically like computers or iPads, where you're just buying thousands of $400 ones, but in total they add up. And we want to use $750,000, and we have we've also ran that number by our audit firm, and they have agreed that they agree with that level. So in this policy, a couple little changes. One, the second paragraph said the superintendent's responsible for setting up the system. I changed that to my position. I thought I would take Dr. Epps out of it. And I'll take responsibility for maintaining the accurate inventory of materials, equipment in the school system. And then I put in the director of finance, that's Elizabeth Robinson, and she's going to ensure that they're recorded systematically and accurately, which she does because the person that handles this specifically is in her department, in the finance department. But the middle section is the new sentence that we've added. In addition, in accordance with Government Accounting Standards Implementation Guide number 2021-1, certain types of assets such as computers, iPads.
We are on totally.
That's not what's in our documents.
That's totally different
Oh.
than what we've got.
So
That's not in your documents.
it's not. Ours is a one-page.
We have DID, we don't have the associated rule.
It's not in the rule. It's the one, it's the actual policy.
Yeah, we don't have that one.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. So,
Before we, like, my antenna went up. 750,000, give me that again. Help me
so
grasp
we're
that.
proposing to add, and this is just first reading, and we'll get this out too. We're proposing to add the sentence that certain types of assets such as computers, iPads, classroom furniture, library books, kitchen equipment, and other technology items, when bundled and purchased in the aggregate, so it's when we go out and do a purchase,
Right.
one purchase order, one invoice, will be identified as a single capital asset and capitalized if the total amount exceeds $750,000. This would apply regardless if the individual cost of each unit is less than $5,000 for a single unit.
Okay.
And this implementation guide is effective for periods beginning after June 15th. That's why we're bringing it for first reading tonight, and then we'll bring it for second reading at the June 6th meeting.
Yeah, so if you could go ahead and send us that document after tonight's meeting,
Absolutely.
we'll have plenty of time before the.
And we did not need to make any changes to the administrative rule, other than the title just said inventories, and we'd like to add inventory/fixed assets. But we did not need to make any changes on that one. But we will send that out to you tomorrow. Okay. The second policy that I have is a new policy. It would be DGD, credit card use. This is a new policy that is proposed by the South Carolina School Boards Association. We have not had a board policy related to credit card use. We do have an internal document, which is called our procurement card policy, that all holders of our cards have to review and sign off when they receive a card. But we also recently updated this for the new procurement code, and every employee just recently had to review this and sign it. So we have had an internal policy requirement. We just have not had a board policy that the School Boards Association is now recommending. But this basically just outlines that the superintendent would determine which staff members would be provided use of district cards. It also clarifies that district cards would be collected upon separation of employment. And probably one of the most important things is staff members in violation of this policy would be subject to disciplinary action in accordance with our staff conduct policy.
So same situation with that policy, if you wouldn't mind making sure that we.
Okay, and we did not propose, this is the wording recommended by the School Boards Association, and we did not feel that we needed to make any additional changes on this policy.
And I think the one
That
in
may
our
be the one
packet
that we
is
have,
the
but
one we
just-
have,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Because it's new, as opposed to
Yeah, right.
something that's being
Yeah, it says proposed
updated, yeah,
so you can see this one?
yes,
Okay,
It's the same. Yeah, I believe that's the same one.
it is.
okay, perfect, then. Okay, any questions about that one?
Before I forget, it's
Sure.
back on a budget, but it's just a request
Okay.
at you all's convenience. If you could provide me with the same way you all provided us with the student athletes for high school, if you could provide that for our middle schoolers, I'm
Yes.
curious. I would like to see that number.
Let me remember, we will. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh. Okay, so any questions on the new credit card policy? Okay, thank you. I think I'm done.
All right, so then the next one is similar. We have a first reading of a policy about clear bag usage.
All right, so this is policy KFD. This is a new policy, clear bag use at district events. And really it's for the purpose of providing a safe and secure environment at district athletic events and activities. This is recommended by the Department of Homeland Security. A lot of our neighboring districts have already implemented the clear bag policy. It really allows one large clear bag plus a small clutch bag, whatever that is, per person. And exceptions would obviously be made for those with necessary medical items or any type of media credentials that we would allow in. As you can see on the graphic that Mr. Burke was so kind to create for us, it clearly shows what is and is not allowed, and we would advertise this policy this way. Again, many of the surrounding districts, I don't know if you've been to Rock Hill, or I think Lancaster County even does it. They have clear bag policies. And I think Clover and York were trying to implement them as well. So,
And we would obviously promote this and advertise it and make sure everybody was
Correct.
well aware before things like, I don't know, football games at the beginning of the school.
Correct. Yep.
And it doesn't apply to the athletes.
Well, no, they would already be there most likely, so it would not apply to them really. It'd mostly be for fans. And yeah.
How the basketball team comes and sits up there, but they don't have to go by clear.
Right. It would be mostly for anybody that purchased a ticket or had a pass to get into the game or event.
And it's district events, so it's not unique to sporting events. It would be theater
Correct.
performances, band performances, et cetera.
Now we would have some type of like for if you remember when your kids were in elementary school, they may have had a chorus concert at the end of the day, or we probably would not look for clear bag policy at those types of events at the elementary school. But for district events after school, those are the type of events we would be focused on.
Questions?
I guess I would just, based on the last statement, I don't disagree.
Yep.
In theory, but I think that if we're going to have a policy, I think that we need to be uniform across implementation and not get into what I'll deem, or over here I can hear somebody saying, oh, you pick and choose. No, this is the policy.
The big issue with that would be when we were thinking about this policy, and I actually talked to some of my colleagues in other districts, there's nobody to man. Really, it would have to be the front office receptionist that would be looking to make sure they have those clear bags. So really it would be events that we would have somebody where they're, if that makes sense.
Yep. There's an official gatekeeper.
Right.
At the event. Okay.
All right.
All right. So then, 2 more policies, and I think you're going to cover for.
I'm going to try to be Liza tonight.
You have your heels on?
I do not. So the next 2 policies are also recommended by the School Boards Association. Both of these policies, this is policy GCQE, GDQC, retirement of professional staff and retirement of support staff. So both of these are identical policies for certified and support staff. They're recommended by the School Boards Association as model policies. In a nutshell, both policies indicate that employees should reach out to PEBA directly via their website to confirm their retirement eligibility. There are various ways to meet retirement eligibility, and it's best to seek their guidance first. And then employees should notify HR in writing of their intent to retire, preferably by March 15th each year. That's it.
Okay. All right, then we'll hear back from all of those at our next meeting for a second reading and a vote. And then one more, I think, discussion item, which is high school flex. Mr. Scroggs and principals.
Look, he's bringing friends.
All right, good evening. I did ask the principals to join me. First, I want to start off clarifying Dr. Wakesness gives his regrets. He was stricken with a nasty stomach bug. He's been vital to this process and wishes he could be here tonight, but I've asked the principals to be with us, and Darren, or Mr. Wilson, is rooting on both as a principal and a father, the Catawba Ridge High School softball team. So his assistant principal for curriculum and instruction, Mr. Ledford, is here representing Catawba Ridge. So I asked them to be up here. There may be questions that they can chime in on with their school-specific perspective, and it may be something where they've got something to add to this as well. Before we dive into it, I just want to also point out that this is the result of a collaborative effort between all three high schools. This is something emerging from discussions between the principals. What we present tonight is a consensus recommendation of all three high school administrations, and each school has taken actions to talk with their teachers. We've also surveyed, we've talked about this, and there's no perfect solution to this that checks everybody's box for preferences, but this is the consensus response, and I just kind of want to walk you through that and our thought processes. So, identifying the issues with why we decided to touch on the schedule at all was really we wanted to address two main things. We have been doing flex for about 10 years. It has worked well, but we've identified some issues with the current structure, specifically, and I'll get into this in a little bit, the amount of students in classrooms. That's one of the feedback we have received from principals, is that teachers cannot provide those CI3T Tier 2, Tier 3 supports, thank you, to the extent that they wish, because there may be 28 bodies in the room. They have 3 or 4 that need extra help, and they have to supervise the rest. So it is a distraction, and we're trying to come up with something that would limit that and allow more robust intervention for those groups. And then secondly, creating a high school master schedule that allows for PLCs during teacher contracted time is virtually impossible without limiting access to certain courses. And we'll explain what that looks like in a little bit. So first, Flex is designed to give us a time during the school day where we can get extra help. That's tutoring, extra help, time to finish assignments. It's been built in to allow all students to come. It's been built into the school day to not have students come before or after school. We have transportation-dependent students. We want to make sure all of them have an opportunity to receive extra help supports as needed. The main issue with that, as I mentioned before, is number. That 3 or 4 students are the prime target for who needs extra help. And in many cases, we have so many students who are on campus. We have students who sit quietly and work on homework, and we have others, but sometimes it is difficult to provide a Tier 2, Tier 3 instruction in a crowded classroom. So we feel that it is imperative that we have PLCs to accelerate the learning for all students. That's part of a guaranteed viable curriculum for all students. We think that that is a mechanism for advancing instruction in the district, so we want to make sure teachers have the ability to do that. We know that PLCs are not recommended to take place after school when it's on the teacher's hours. It doesn't lead to the most productive conversations. We want to build it into their workday. And we also know that we want to expand that. Currently, at all 3 high schools, it's 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more at Nation Ford. They were able to work a little magic there, but we want to expand that to at least 40 minutes of time a week, and I'm going to show you a schedule that gives us 45 minutes of time. We're committed to creating structures that allow for professional development during that workday, as I said before. So we cannot at a high school go ahead and block off an entire block and say all math teachers have first block planning so they can have a PLC without really putting a strain on the ability for high school students to get into other courses in the remaining 3 blocks of that semester. So with that being the case, that's why we are experimenting with where can we build in that time when more than just 1 or 2 teachers can have planning together, but all teachers on the team, every algebra teacher can come together, every geometry teacher can come together, and not just 1 or 2. And that's what we're trying to solve with this. This means if we were to go this route, students would not have access to all their classes. We've always prioritized high scheduling rates for our students. So we are not lengthening the school day at all. If you look at the contracted hours for teachers, they are 8:25 to 3:55 at the high school. We're not lengthening the day at all. We want to move that forward 5 minutes. So we're shifting the entire 7.5-hour day ahead just by 5 minutes. So we're asking teachers to report at 8:20 in the morning, and they dismiss 5 minutes earlier at 3:50. The move, however, allows if teachers arrive at 8:20 in the morning, they can have 5 minutes to kind of get their bearings, make their way to their first meeting, and from 8:25 until 9:10, they can have a 45-minute weekly flex block without having to sacrifice staying after school to have that PLC time, and it expands it at all 3 schools to a 45-minute block. A consistent PLC time between the 3 schools also allows for some cross-school collaboration. So if you're a teacher of what we call a singleton course, you are the only AP English teacher. You don't have anyone to plan with right now. But if the English teacher at Nation Ford and Catawba Ridge and Fort Mill all have this time, they can hop on a Google Meet, they can hop on a Zoom, and they can collaborate. It would allow some cross-school collaboration and more robust PLCs for a group that has never really had that opportunity. How can we meet the true goal of Flex and PLC structures to allow for and provide structures to allow for PLCs? So what are our imminent goals here? Really to allow for very small class sizes in Flex. We think that the lever for that, the driver for that is going to be flexible student attendance. That if students have an option to opt out of attending Flex if they're in good standing, is going to lessen that. So if you have an A, you have a B, we haven't worked out the individual cutoff, and I'm going to say that needs to be a decision driven by teachers, where that line is. So the principals didn't want to make that decision for teachers alone. We want to have teacher input on that, and I'll get into how that'll occur a little bit later as well. Develop a structure that allows all content area teachers to collaborate. So that's really what we're talking about. All biology teachers can meet, all geometry teachers can meet in a PLC setting. All right, so this is the overview of the schedule I'll show you in just a couple of slides. There are no changes to the start time or end time of school. That is a direct response to teacher feedback. We did put out a survey. Some teachers took it upon themselves as well to communicate their feelings via email, and one of our first drafts really was to start the school day at like 8:20, and they said no, we do not want that. So we went back to the drawing board, found something that keeps the day right where it is. Currently it begins at 8:40 and dismisses at 8:40 and dismisses at 3:40, and we've found something that works within those parameters. Flex starts at 8:40 and ends at 9:10 a.m. That's when I say flex, I am referring to when students are getting extra help. And I mentioned before, when I say PLCs, those are beginning at 8:25 and still going to 9:10. So one day a week, all math teachers would say, I am not providing extra help in Flex. I am having a PLC. And that is not dissimilar from what's going on right now. Right now at all 3 high schools, there is a day that each department says, we are closed for Flex. You need to see your other teachers to allow for 30 minutes of common time. But some of the issues there are, again, that short, brief window of time. You have 30 minutes, then you got to hustle back to your classroom. So we're trying to make sure that is accommodated. Bus riders would still arrive to school by 8:40, so it does not change transportation, and that was a big goal. We heard a lot of, if it's 8:20, how are the buses going to get there? 8:40 is when school starts, and we have some times when students are arriving just before the bell, so how in the world would they get help at 8:20? So again, we did that in direct response to teacher feedback. The school day would end at the current time of 3:40. If you are a bus rider and do not need assigned Flex, so you say, I have all A's and I really don't need to see my teacher, but I do need a bus to bring me to school and to take me home from school, we're going to have a non-punitive place for students to come in, and they can have basically a study hall. They can have time to look over their notes, to do what they need to do from basically arrival, 8:40 until 9:10, and then they'll, just like all of their peers, go on to class. This can be a time for them to finish homework, catch up on things. But again, this is not a punitive, we're going to keep them silent in one area, and that's not the goal here, is to have a punitive response at all. All right, so how would we go about this? We want to set some clear parameters, but I'm going to say that the most important thing here is to have the teachers help determine what those clear parameters are. They work with the students. They know who they need to see and how much they need to see them. I think I may be getting ahead on a couple of slides, but we want to have 2 teachers from each of the schools working with some representatives of the administration to create kind of a steering committee to say, what do we do if a student has C? Is that I need to see you 1 day a week? Is that I need to see you 2 days a week? What if they have a D or an F? Is that all those days? So we really want the teachers to drive what that looks like. So we're gonna have a committee representative of the schools. The principals will put forward those names to work out those individual details. But we need to communicate before school starts in August a very clear vision of, if I have all A's and all B's, this is what happens. If I have a C, this is what happens, and so on and so forth. If any student wants to attend Flex, they can. I fielded a lot of questions about, what if I have all A's and I just want to see my teacher for extra help? Can I come into Flex? Absolutely. We will never turn a student away from Flex. The goal is to reduce it by giving them options, but we would never turn away someone who wants to better themselves by seeing their teacher. So if it's test day and I want that 99, I can come in and I can get extra help from my teacher. Consistent school hours. I think I mentioned before, the school day starts at Flex. At all 3 high schools, students would only arrive at 9:15 if they are not assigned by their teacher to Flex, and that's a common practice now. All 3 high schools, the teacher can say, I need to see you at Flex. Flex is between 3rd and 4th block currently, and they can make an appointment. We would continue that practice. If the teacher says, you need to come see me for Flex, they can assign that student to Flex. But if you're not assigned, you do not have to be there till 9:15, and then meet the exempt criteria. And again, that's going to be determined by a team of teachers and administrators. They and do not wish to attend. I'm in good standing. I have my A's and B's. I can show up at 9:15. If students are asked to Flex and do not attend, their absence will be recorded. We're going to keep up with who's where, and they will receive appropriate disciplinary consequences. What that consequence is non-academic. We would never punish a grade, but we are going to allow the team of teachers and administrators to have input and say what that is, the people closest to it, because we certainly don't want to see someone punished grandly, going to the alternative school, things of that nature over trying to not showing up for extra help. Common district schedule, again, why is it so important? And that's another common question. Why is it so important that we not have variance between Catawba and Nation Forward, or Nation Forward and Fort Mill? Well, we shuttle a lot of classes that are school-specific classes. So Auto Tech is only on the campus of Nation Forward, but Fort Mill and Catawba students need to access it, so we need to keep that same schedule so that they can have the shuttle block. So even if there's variance of, my school really would like it after this block, but my school really wants it over here, it has to really be the same if we're going to work out those details. A common schedule also makes it possible for teachers of like subjects, as I mentioned before, to have a partner at the other schools to bounce ideas off of and be in a PLC with. All right, so here it is. Here is the proposed Bell schedule for next year. This is a different iteration than what was shared in the survey with teachers, as we've incorporated their feedback into this as well. One of the things we got was the class changes are too short or too long. At my school, I need 10 minutes. At my school, I don't need 10 minutes. I need 7 minutes to get to class, or even less. So we developed a schedule. Flex begins at 8:40, ends at 9:10. We give everybody 5 minutes because it's really the beginning of the day to kind of make your way to first block. And the first block is 83 minutes with an 8-minute travel between schools. And if you'll notice kind of down in that box there at the top, it says schools may shift class times 1 to 2 minutes to accommodate faculty needs and facility needs. So if you're at Fort Mill, our largest campus, and Mr. Beam indicated that they need 10 minutes to get there, we're going to give them 10 minutes to get there, and they can shave that off of the 83. If you are at the more compact indoor schools of Catawba Ridge and Nation Forward, you don't need as long, and if they can shave it down from 8 to 7 and they want to push another minute in instruction, go for it. We're going to allow that variance for schools, and that was in direct response to teacher feedback. So 83-minute blocks. It did not work out with perfect numbers. We wanted to give every single block 83 minutes. Unfortunately, one of them has to be 82 with this schedule. We put it at 4th block, but we're going to leave that to the teachers. If they come back and they say, we want to start the morning with 1 fewer minutes, then we'll absolutely change the schedule to accommodate that request. You'll notice that this schedule, also incorporating teacher feedback, moves lunch to 3rd block. And I'll go into the reason for why the initial proposal had it at second in a slide or two, but this keeps students eating between 12:17 and 2:10 every day, which is a common expectation for high school. That was one of the overwhelming feedbacks we received from teachers, and we wanted to be accommodating to that request. I'm going to go over a couple more things. There is an opportunity for questions. You can always stop me if there's something just burning as we go. The start time for this, no one will have less than an A on day one. So we don't think it's feasible necessarily to start on day one. We recommend that we would start on the second week, and then mandatory flex if you were in the whatever those criteria are. But again, I'm just kind of saying D or F. If you have Ds or Fs, you would have mandatory flex beginning in the third week of school. Kind of give you a little while to get your sea legs. If you bomb that first quiz, we'll let you recover a bit there.
What does the schedule look like on a day that you don't have flex?
We would push eliminating the flex would push those minutes back to like a 90-minute block.
Because there are other times in the year that you don't have flex as well.
Yes. And y'all can help me out with some of that, but I would say test days, ACT,
Yeah.
early release days.
Alternate schedule
Mhm.
that will go from 8:40 to 3:40
Mhm.
without flex.
And we want to incorporate teacher feedback again on what that is. So that steering committee is going to make a list of these are the days we absolutely can't have flex, or these are the days we don't want to end it early. We want to see it go all the way to the end. So we're going to allow the teacher committee to help determine what that is.
So in that theory, how hard is it going to be to get a high school student to remember that tomorrow is a different day that I need to be there for regular instruction?
That happens now. So in actuality, they come on every morning with announcements and share, hey guys, remember this is coming up. We have early, the 2-hour early release. We will not be observing flex. They also have to remind their faculties students every day, hey, math teachers are off limits today, so make sure during flex time you go see some of these others. So it sort of puts an emphasis on daily announcements to help remind students. It's too much to keep every teacher's sacred day in your head without some reminders.
But on a non-flex day, attendance is taken at 8:40, not at 9.
8:40. School always starts at 8:40 a.m. We're just allowing an exemption for those students in good standing till 9. I say good standing, but meeting the criteria for exception at 9:15.
Is there a place that's going to be publicly posted? Because, having a 16-year-old at home, trusting that he's got to be there if he's got an A in a class, he has to be there tomorrow at 8:40 instead of.
That's that remind out.
Well.
Yes, sir. The high school principals send out a weekly email blast. They will share that with parents. They will share that with students. And I'd imagine that can be something posted in every classroom with a graphic to say, these are the days they're on, these are the days they're off. Perfect. All right.
Student handbooks have already been printed with scheduling and so on and so forth, have they not?
No, ma'am, not for next year.
Okay. So that's just the
Program of studies, the academic program of studies. So faculty and staff input. The proposed schedule has been modified in response to faculty and staff input collected from a district survey. Faculty and staff voiced a strong concern for lunch being so early. Working with the Office of Student Nutrition and the State Department, we believe we have found a path for keeping it in third block. We can solicit a waiver of the federal rule. It's a federal rule, not just there's some state legislation that's proposed saying between 11 and 2. That is not passed. This is really in regards to a currently standing federal regulation that says it has to conclude by 2 o'clock. And I tried everything I could to see, and so did Dr. Wakesons, to see how can we push past that. Well, Student Nutrition found a way by contacting the State Department. They said you can file for a waiver saying it is an academic necessity because, and we're going to say it's enrichment for our students and enrichment for our teachers through PLCs, and file a waiver that would allow us to conclude at 2:10, which is the only reason it ever was suggested to be in second block beginning at like 10:46, 10:47 in the morning. Despite some students at elementary and middle school begin eating that early, but we also know that the big kids stay a little bit longer and then go on to athletic practice and things of that nature. So that was direct faculty feedback. The faculty also talked about, as I mentioned, wanting it to keep it between 8:40 and 3:40, keeping our work hours consistent. So then, and I mentioned as well, class changes, too long, too short, based off of need, so we wanted to provide that individual variation. All right, as we move forward with determining the additional specifics, a team of teachers from each school will collaborate with building administrators to look at the parameters for required and assigned flex, consequences for missing and assigned flex, the timeline for implementation, which days we will meet, which days we won't, the rules and protocols for flex, and much more. We want to do that with the boots on the ground, with the people in the classroom, with the students who say, I'm living it every day. We want to get their direct input on how that's going to work out. So we're going to have that team of representative democracy in action, where they'll build some consensus.
Soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Be communicated long before school starts.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. All right. So I have some. I'll try and address some questions before they're asked, and then open it up broadly for questions and allow the principals to kind of field what they can. Does school start at 8:40 or 9:10? Absolutely, it starts at 8:40 every day, and we went over the parameters for why you wouldn't arrive till 9:15. Can I attend flex for extra help? Yes, absolutely you can. It's open to all students. What about bus transportation? That was a common concern. A lot of people thought this was in response to bus transportation. Transportation was never, no pun intended, driving the situation. It was all about the PLCs and trying to make flex more effective by limiting the number of students that are in the classroom. So if buses typically have dropped off by 8:40, they will encounter situations where there's a traffic jam, but in specific, they're dropped off by 8:40, so you're going to get to attend for the entire flex duration. Can I see a teacher if I have an A or B? We hope so. Or not we hope so, you will. Absolutely, we never turn a student away. How long are the class changes? As I mentioned, it's responsive to the individual school's needs. If flex is still 30 minutes, how do we get that extra time? That's by requiring the teachers having the teachers begin at 8:25 and go to 9:10 instead of that 8:40. So the students, when they're getting help, it's always 8:40. When it's the teachers, it's 8:25, and that's all within the confines of their currently existing 7.5-hour day. Why was lunch so early? There's a federal regulation requiring it. How are you able to extend it? Thanks to Tammy Welch and her crew for reaching out. We were able to get that federal waiver. Will this make the day longer? No. And there's common misconception that the day will be longer. We still absolutely begin and end at the same time. Will it make it longer for teachers? No. It just starts 5 minutes earlier, but also ends 5 minutes earlier. Will this cause athletes to miss even more time in class? There was a common question of, won't they miss more time? The current flex block or fourth block ends at 3:40 and kind of generally begins around 2:20. That stays the same because flex is at the beginning of the day instead of between third and fourth. Fourth doesn't actually change. The same time that students miss for a basketball game when they have to travel, they would miss. It does not change it. It doesn't solve it, but it does not change it. So I open the floor for any questions that you may have.
Before we dive into questions, just for clarification, does the board take any action on this at all?
I mean, if there is no change to the actual school day, then there's no board requirement to vote on anything along those lines, because just like we don't set the bell schedule at elementary and middle either, right?
We set the bell time, we don't set what
we don't do
classes,
the
we
interim
don't do,
schedule.
we don't do schedule
First, second, and
specific.
third period, any of
Right.
that kind of stuff,
Right.
teachers, all that.
So to clarify for Dr. Frateroli, this is the consensus plan for the three high schools for the 23-24 school year. It does not require board approval. This is to kind of put it in front of you to say, this is what we anticipate utilizing as our bell schedule for the first semester. We plan to do this from August to December and evaluate how it's going. So if it goes awry, we have a plan in place to evaluate and pivot mid-year if that occurs. So this is really a trial for success from August to December. We hope that it continues, but obviously we would be responsive to the needs if it did not.
It has moved before.
Yes.
In all the schools over the years, as you've tried.
Prior to recent alignment, Fort Mill had it after first. Nation Ford had it after third. Catawba Ridge, where was it? After second. So.
Okay. Well, and I feel like flex way back early on was at a different time
only
even
2 days a
still, and yeah.
Flex at one point was 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was attached to the lunch block. Students had an entire hour of lunch/flex. So this is multiple iterations. I was an admin before Flex, and this is this is version 3 or 4.0 at this point.
We didn't, I don't think you touched on, but young lady here earlier was talking about clubs. How does this impact clubs? What do we anticipate here?
So clubs, prior to Flex, clubs met before and after school in this district way longer than they met during Flex. There was robust participation during that time because of what she mentioned: interest, teacher-student relationships, and a sense of belonging, and it wasn't driven by schedule. We anticipate that clubs will still be allowed to meet during that flex time. They can still meet before and after school as well as needed. Obviously, when it's built into the center of the school day and you have a captive audience, there's probably going to be a broader participation. But again, I don't think that this will collapse clubs by any stretch, because they're really driven by student interest, the teacher-student relationship, and that sense of belonging that comes from being in a club. If you want to be connected in school, we'll still promote those at the schools. So we're not anticipating it going away. But what she said was absolutely true. There are going to be some students that look at this and say, I have A's, I don't want to come in, I want to sleep in. But those that are connected to things like, I know the Nation Forward has a vibrant club scene. I think all 3 high schools do, but when Nation Forward presented their school spotlight, they talked about how important those are. I think those relationships will carry over in terms of driving students to continue relationships both with their peers and their teachers, to come in at 8:40 when is a traditional school hour. Will it get everybody? It will not.
Ballpark, what percentage of your students do bus transportation in the morning versus private transportation? You have a feel? And it's probably not the same for everybody, but say again? About 500 to take buses, so about a quarter, about 25% take a bus, give or take. So 25% are going to be there.
Regardless. Yes, ma'am. Still have a captive audience for some.
It makes my heart super happy that you got teacher input on this and made some changes. Just as somebody who's been on the, Peanut, not crying. On the teacher side of the desk, a lot of times admin has great ideas, but they don't actually know what it would be like to live it. And it makes me super happy that you got teacher input. I'm just curious, because we got a lot of feedback that I'm pretty sure Ms. Spears forwarded to y'all about why it should be at the end of the day. So I'm assuming you also asked your teachers about that, and I'm curious what their answer was about why it should not be flex at the end of the day.
So, said another way, we got a handful of notes from students who would prefer it be at the end of the day. And I think Lippy's question is, was that considered and discussed, and there was a reason for the earlier part instead of the later part of the day?
Sure, I'd start and you can jump in if you have anything to share. After Fourth was given significant discussion, and it is not off the table in the long run as far as consensus, as far as we talk about does this work or not. But the consensus plan that we came to was before school is what we could agree to for the 23-24 school year. I will be very honest with you that there was not a direct question put forward to faculties of would you prefer it after Fourth, because the plan that was when we got in the room with the principals to say what can we agree to that between the 3 schools, ultimately was let's try it with first and see how that goes. There were some concerns, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but there were some concerns about it being easier to have students stay at home supervision-wise if they are in exempt status, rather than trying to say, all right, it's the end of the day, y'all leave, and say we might have students that sneak off. There's a litany of reasons that were discussed as to why we weren't sure about releasing 14, 15, 16-year-olds into the community every day around 2 o'clock without necessarily mom and dad picking up. So there are other concerns to it. So from supervision to feeling like this was ultimately the consensus plan. So I did not want to paint a picture that was asked in the survey. It was not. It was presented, this is the plan. And give me your feedback on it. What do you like? What do you not like? How do you feel about the current flex? How do you feel about the new flex?
So with that consideration, though, looking at the fourth block problem that exists with athletes leaving and missing, or clubs missing a significant amount of time in a school year, wouldn't flex after school solve that problem? As well as other issues that we've had discussions about openly about students that might start work earlier, right, to help support the family, that they're getting out. If they're an all-A student, they have those opportunities earlier in the day than they do first thing in the morning. Like sort of the benefits that would come at looking at that, do they outweigh students coming earlier in the day?
We talked about the specifics of if one of our express goals was to eliminate the early dismissal bubble cutting into direct instruction, then that would be it. That was not one of the explicit goals when we set out to build this. That is something that obviously teachers have voiced an interest in. But again, it's really kind of varies school to school. One school's response was, we definitely, almost not unanimously, but close to it, we definitely want it after fourth. Another school said, we don't want it before or after. It's kind of school by school where that falls. So again, that wasn't an express goal. Would that eliminate that piece? Yes. Some of the concern about what I mentioned before from a supervision standpoint, feeling like it's easier for you to stay at home and arrive later rather than be on campus and clear the campus effectively, or have students sneak off, or the feeling of how would the community feel with an influx around 2 o'clock of students. That was the reasoning behind it. I'm not saying that it is right or wrong. I'm just saying, again, that wasn't an express goal. So that's something we'll continue to monitor as we move forward.
Wouldn't it just be 30 minutes earlier?
Yes, sir.
Right. So
3 o'clock, 3:10.
I'm sorry. Then I misspoke. I was not trying to mislead them.
Right. I'm just. Yeah.
I did hear some conversation about that would be about the same time that middle school was dismissing, and so it would clog up the areas worse for the middle school buses trying to get dropped off and then get back to pick up the high school kids.
Agree, but for a family that's counting on that older kid to help out with whether it's working or childcare or otherwise, the end of the day might help better. So I sent y'all my email earlier, so I'm not gonna totally belabor it. However, I asked in my email about the number of students that sign out early. Mr. Beam and I have discussed his numbers. He's going to reevaluate his numbers and get back to me. Because it's my belief that if we have, let's call it 2,000 kids that are leaving early and I say 2,000 kids from September to March that are leaving early, and that doesn't count a club kid, an athlete, a band, or any of the rest of, mock trial or anybody. If our intent is not only to help remediate for the kids and give them more time for assisting in those needs and in that help, but then to also allow for teachers to collaborate and have that PLC environment, I just think that the seat time is where it really becomes the evidence and where that works and reiterates the purpose, I guess is the best way I know how to say that.
So you're not talking about kids leaving early for sports. You're talking about kids leaving early for some other reason, like an orthodontist appointment?
Correct.
I don't know, is that worse in the afternoon than in the morning?
Well, we're gonna reevaluate and see, but yes, the numbers are higher in the afternoon than they are in the morning. And the morning with what Mr. Beam had put together and sent over, it was encompassing, the car broke down. We give student drivers 2 or 3 passes, whatever, a semester for that. If we are pulling the 1-2 minute kind of pieces out of this, and this is the true orthodontist appointment that's coming in late versus everybody that's leaving early in the afternoon for the same purpose or not, I just think that the impact at the end of the day, with Flex being at the end of the day, for its purpose will be greater than being in the morning. And as someone who, I know how Michael reacted with Flex and what that was or wasn't in my household. And I go back to, and we talked about this the last time, I go back to when I was in school 100 years ago, and I know that 8:40, and yeah, that's not happening. And that was a long time ago. So to think that that has changed, I don't kid myself, I know it hasn't. She said so when she was here.
Yes, ma'am. And I'll say again, I'm the face at the mic, but I'm speaking both for Dr. Wakesness and the three principals.
They're all sitting back there going, no.
Yeah, they don't. No one volunteered for this. I'll say I personally started opposed to the idea of fourth, and then through our discussions, it is not off the table for me. Like I am open to that idea because I do see that piece. It's just been we have had a lot of conversations, a lot of in person, a lot of Zooms, and ultimately where there is push and pull on a lot of subjects. So that's had fierce advocacy in the room. It's also had some pushback. So again, I don't want to say what Gales feels about it. Gales, like I see the benefits. I really, at this point, am a believer it could go there. It is simply where were we able to finally land and say this is what we can all agree? Because like I mentioned before, I've got some schools saying I am so worried about its effect on clubs. I've got some schools saying I would much rather prioritize the fourth block. Where we all said, all right, look, it will be effective to move it to allow that additional PLC time. We're going to start it here and see. And again, I could come back to you in December. I don't want to promise anything, but I could come back to you in December and say, overwhelmingly, even it is working, but we want to try it in fourth. Or we could say it's not working at all. We want to try it in fourth. Or we may just say, heck no, we want to go back. So this is kind of a trial run to see where it goes.
Well, and I think that's also important. Back to one of the questions Dr. Federelli asked earlier. Is it is not etched in stone forever. And so what we don't want is a kid taking a new job that they that they can't be at school before 9:10 or whatever, because on certain days you're going to need to be at school at 8:40 even if you think you're never going to have an academic need.
Right. And part of it, too, that I hadn't articulated till this moment is to protect against the creep of other things. By that, I mean, if jobs are out there and want to push for that time, there may be an employer saying, hey, I need you more than, get all your A's, and you don't need to stay for the test. I need you to work this shift today. And then we talk about the lure of dollar amounts versus that grade. So again, I don't want to say that that's going to happen in every case and vilify our local employers by any stretch. I just want to say that could be a situation. So again, I think there are merits to it for certain and for sure. So I want to acknowledge that. But again, it's not about me. It's really the team that has discussed.
And I appreciate the conversation that we had the last time and the reiteration this time that we're going to reevaluate. This may or may not be what it is. The only other thing that I will say, I just think, and we talked about it with policy and consistency. School starts at 8:40. School starts at 8:40. School ends at 3:40. That's, for me, that's the message. School starts at 8:40 and it ends at 3:40.
That's one of the advantages of also not starting Flex right away at the beginning of the year.
Right.
That week or 2 week
Right.
time period and saying, this is your normal time.
Yeah.
This is what you need to get used to. And now, if you earn the incentive of you have an A or B, you can actually get it here at 19.
Or school starts at 8:40.
To the very first part of this conversation, this is an administrative decision. This is not a board decision. I appreciate the dialogue. I think had been enough information and misinformation out there that it was worth talking about it. My only request is that if anything changes, as things changes, as information becomes concrete, we make sure that it's well communicated to the broad community, to the board, to everybody else, so that we can all be on the same page.
And then that's part of the timeline of this. Is it's been something the principals have explored and researched all second semester long, and we want to make sure that teachers have a general idea as they head into summer break what they would be returning to. This is not something we wanted to spring on teachers over the summer without a chance for dialogue, without a chance for getting survey feedback when you're not on a beach somewhere, not wanting to provide feedback. Likewise, it'll give us the opportunity to select those teachers who will be on the steering committee, set them up for some time over the summer to come in and give them compensation to come in and steer this in the direction it needs to, so that we can give clear messaging to parents and teachers and students alike of this is the plan in August. Before school starts, so you have a clear indication of what's going on, when it'll be official, when you can have that opt-out if you have all A's, et cetera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all bear with us. We got a couple more. We got 2 action items. The first one is Ms. Lordo talking about year-end funds transfer.
Thank you. At the last board meeting, I presented to you an option for the year-end transfer. This is consistent with what we've done in prior years. This is based on additional, or my estimation of additional property tax revenue over budget. A lot of interest earnings this year, which came as a surprise. That's wonderful. And a little bit of state money. Usually the state money's been larger, but a little bit. So at this point, I'm projecting about 3.8 million. We need to increase our general fund balance to keep it at that 18 to 19% range. So that would leave us the availability to propose to you to transfer about 1.8 million. You'll see most of the items are consistent with things. These are non-recurring expenditures. Even though you see some of these every year, these are non-recurring. Media center collection to maintain our compliance standards, the small capital purchases, some school furniture requests, classroom setups, middle school athletic equipment replacement, the district-funded athletic insurance, some additional funding for the high school athletic funds. I've shared with you, I do have some concern at some point we're going to need to build more into the general fund toward high school athletics. Then 2 of our high schools have requested some band instrument replacements. And I have the detailed list from both of those 2 high schools. And then the curriculum items that did not make the Category 4 list. These are not new items. These are, once again, pieces that I've shifted. I used to pay out of some state special revenue. Some of these then went to ESSER, and now I don't have a home for these expenditures. And then 400,000 to the contingency fund would make up the other piece. So I am requesting your consideration of a transfer of $1,802,142 at this time. As you remember, I may come back to you later in the summer after we are have all of our final tax revenues, all of our final state revenues, and we're working through our audit adjustments if we have any additional opportunities to transfer.
These numbers have not changed since last week.
They have not changed since 2 weeks ago, correct?
Yes. And restating something I brought up last time, these are very common to, this looks like similar to prior lists, prior years.
Correct, correct. These are all things that, that have not made it into the general fund budget.
But are also not Category 5. They're just stuff
Correct.
that we do.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration for end-of-year transfer of $1,802,142.
Second.
Motion and a second for an end-of-year transfer of $1,802,142. Any discussion?
Do we also need to include the contingent, the 2 million, it's actually 3 point whatever.
3.8 total.
You do not, because the, I won't move the 3.8, just the 2 million will go into the general fund balance at year end.
Okay.
So, great question, but you do not need to authorize that because that will happen in the closeout of the accounting records.
Any discussion?
None further.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That
Thank you.
motion carries. All right, one more. One more. Mr. Burke, let's talk about the calendar.
Guess I am batting cleanup tonight, and I have a 47-slide PowerPoint we can discuss the intricacies of a modified calendar. Which one of you academic people
Right
stole
there
my
on the-
thing?
there
There
you
it
go.
is. All right, before we get into the calendars, I wanted to discuss a little bit about modified calendars. We've talked a lot in here about what is a modified calendar, and my response has been nobody knows. To that point, I spent some time today and I literally visited every school district website in the state today and went to view their calendars. Of that, all the districts that are out there, there's a rough estimate, was it 78, 79, somewhere in that range. I was able to download 50 calendars that are all going to be modified calendars beginning this coming school year. 23-24. Now, our calendar, we're talking about 24-25. So out of that 79-ish, this coming school year, a year ahead of us, are going to be modified calendar. Now, that being said, in those modified calendars, I saw start dates everywhere from, believe it or not, July 21 for students, all the way to August 14th, which would be 1 year ahead of the third, or 1 week ahead of the third Monday. There were a lot of districts, actually, at least a handful that were in that July 21 through 25 through 27, and had teachers coming back mid-July to get their classrooms ready. There were at least 10 of that 50 that had no remediation days in it. They focused on just spaced breaks. They started early, usually in the first week or so of August. They finished, right around the end of May. But they just had spaced breaks, balanced semesters, and that's what they focused on. There were some that had the week-long breaks but had no remediation. The school was just closed. And they had those spaced out at different times, saw all different kinds of stuff, whether it was a week at Thanksgiving or an additional week onto winter break, or several had an additional week on spring break. They had 2 weeks off. Yeah. I'm telling you, I saw everything. I saw a school district that literally starts on the 21st of July and doesn't end until June. So again, there is no standard for what actually would be a modified calendar. Now, the one thing that is kind of in there is that everybody agrees there needs to be, some spaced out breaks, whether it's, 3-day weekend, 4-day weekend, 2 days here, a week there. There needs to be something to break it up. So it's really been up to the districts to determine what fits them best. So I wanted to give you guys that just so you'll know what we're looking at. Now, again, that's for this coming school year, 23-24. I'm betting by the time we hit 24-25, pretty much every district's going to be on a...
Especially because that's the year it becomes a real problem.
Yes. Well, and actually next year is a little bit too, but our schedule worked out okay for us because, again, it's an oddball year. We don't have to take the election day off and things like that. It's not ideal, but we're able to meet we're able to meet our lowest criteria standards, which we can't do in 24-25 to have exams before Christmas. Even some of the school districts that are down near the coast, I won't say the ones that are permanently on the coast, but even some of the ones down near the coast are on modified calendars and starting a tad bit earlier. They're not in the July range, but they're starting at least a week or two earlier. All right, that being said, one of the things you guys asked us to go back and look at is some cost of remediation. Now, these are very high ballpark numbers. We're basing all of this right now on our summer school program, because right now, as we've talked about, we would need some time to build what remediation is going to look like. So we're using summer school as a model to kind of give you guys some costs. But there are things in here that would still have to be calculated. For example, there may be costs associated with special needs, depending on what the level of service is determined to be for that, which would take a little more than just the 2 weeks we have between the board meeting, which could add to transportation. There are other costs, such as requirements of having a nurse at a school. We'd have to figure in costs for that per each one. and you'll see in just a minute some of the salary ranges that are being used, again, based off summer school. We'd have to determine some of those support positions that are not already going to be working, like the 240 employees would be. We'd have to see what they might get paid. So in looking at that, again, first, this is the modified draft with remediation. This, again, was done based off of some of the feedback we got. You guys have seen this calendar before. This was the changes we made that we showed you at the last meeting. This includes 4 days of remediation in November and 4 days of remediation in February. Again, it was moved off of the teacher workday, obviously to give teachers a full break that week, but also too, there was some elementary testing that happened around that time, so it was a good time to look at shifting that. The February week does match up with what I've seen for other proposed calendars, but I don't even know if those calendars are going to continue to go forward. Spring break, again, in April, matches what I've seen and what we've agreed upon across the districts with that 21st through the 25th week. And again, the end of school coming in on the 29th with teacher work day on the 30th. This calendar does feature starting students on the 5th, which I saw that was another common start date. Again, what I saw in those modified drafts, I mean, everything started in those first 4 weeks ahead of the allowed start date. So this is what you guys have seen before. Costs associated with remediation. And again, these are all very high level. And again, we use the summer program as our kind of model for this. We're thinking one school per site level. So, one elementary school, one middle, one high, funnel the kids there to it. Looking at a 6.5 hour day, for students, 7 hours for the teachers. Teachers would mirror the summer school pay. What we're thinking right now is the 40 plus hours. So it wouldn't be their independent hourly rate. It would be an additional pay like we do with summer school. So looking at that, we have the estimated costs from salary for teachers at the 3 levels. And again, they base this off of what they are estimating student-wise we might see show up. Transportation is using some of these estimates to determine their bus level. They're thinking 2.5 buses per site level, so 2.5 elementary, 2 middle. Yep. Then, of course, student nutrition. This may look like a low number, but student nutrition gets reimbursement at the free and reduced range. So if they hit the 200 student mark, if they serve 200 students at each site, then they would only be losing $1,000 a day. So it's an odd thing to add in there, but yes. If that number is lower, excuse me, if that number of served student is lower, you might think the loss is less. It's not. It's actually worse because they're going to make the target food and their loss would be more because their service is lower. So looking at this, just with the top ballpark numbers, not all the other things that may have to go into this, depending on who is already scheduled to work and who would have to be hired to work. We're looking at estimated costs just off the top at about $126,000 per week of remediation. Of course, we have 2 weeks in there, so you're looking at $252,000 here. Again, got to figure in a lot of those other salary parts, but this would be the starting point based off of what we see for schools.
So give or take a mil.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, by the time you figure in all some of the other costs that are associated with it, you'd probably be right at the mill, which I think is around $350 right now. Yeah.
So let me ask a question, Joe, and you maybe did with whoever can. We would continue to do summer school, Peter? So
oh yeah,
yes. It wouldn't be like shifting summer school costs into these 2 weeks.
No.
We'd still have a cost in the summer.
Yeah.
And so, Amy, the special ed question, I know by law you have to serve students sometime 24/7. Would there be additional costs you don't see up there for, in other words, would there be a handicap bus involved and that kind of?
Yeah.
Like Joe said, I mean, it's kind of hard to determine. We've been given no guidance on what would be the criteria. Right now, I'm thinking we'd be using the extended school year criteria, which is really based on regression. It's not about closing the gap, it's about maintenance of skill. I don't know how many students would be eligible based on that criteria, given that it's only a week versus summer, which is,
Right.
Several weeks.
Yeah. That cost is not on that wall
Yeah,
right
so-
now, and it
Yeah.
clearly would be some more money.
So the answer was it depends on the criteria.
You should
as
be
to
looking
how
at
much.
additional teachers there. I mean, obviously with the other one, they didn't take into account the special needs teachers that would need to come in, that kind of stuff too. So, again, you're going to see an additional teacher cost. As I mentioned, the nurse that would need to be at school. Some of those costs are already built in because, again, as anybody who's a 240 employee is already going to be working that day. So your administration is going to be there, stuff like that. So you're not having to figure in those types of things. But, you know, we have to go back and look and see which ones are going to qualify, which ones are not, and then figure out who needs to be brought in for work. And then, of course, it is a voluntary position. We're not forcing anybody to come in because these are additional work days outside of a contract. So, you know, you got to staff it too, which, you know, I'm sure we'll be able to staff. We just would need to identify those people who are willing to come in and do those jobs. All right. Before I move on to the next piece I want to show you guys, is there any more questions about this part of? Okay. All right. The next thing we're going to look at is a modified calendar draft without the remediation. And this is similar to something you guys saw the other week that was just in your packet for information, but this is an actual official draft of what we would see in this instance. There are a lot of changes from what you saw before, but what this would focus on, instead of focusing so much on remediation, this would reduce the number of weeks lost in summer. So this is kind of a concession back to some of our people who didn't want their summer shortened. It's still going to get shortened, but what we've done is we're only shortening it by 7 days at the front, and we're giving 3 days back at the back. So we're trying to balance that out a little bit. By the back, I mean by the end of the school year. And really, you would only see that shortening the first year. So once you get into the rotation, the shortening is going to disappear. Exactly. You're shifting it that way. Again, the key thing is it gives us our ballot semesters. That's one of the things that is most important to us, being able to get those exam breaks in, having ballot semesters, pure 90-90. Nobody has extra time in classes on either end. This is a key one. School ending before Memorial Day. And then some of the other things I didn't put in here that this focused on, when you see the calendar, it allows for breaks in each month. When you see the calendar, we tried to create it where each month had some kind of break, whether it was a 3-day weekend, 4-day weekend, you know, something that broke it up. I don't think we go any more than 4 or 5 weeks at most without running into at least a student holiday, if not a student and staff holiday.
Plus then an early dismissal day on top.
And early dismissal days are still figured into this too. Yep. And then of course our 3 half days that we have, and those are used around December and the end of the school year. All right, so what that looks like here, as opposed to the other calendar, our teachers would not be coming back in July. They wouldn't come back till the 1st. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you hear it out there, hey, I've got to be back on the 29th of July. Well, I don't have to be back till the 1st of August. It sounds a lot better.
Feels better.
It's me trying to sell that. But no, seriously, teachers would not be coming back into August, so we wouldn't be impeding on the July month. I think that was something that really caught a lot of people off guard when we looked at the remediation weeks, is that we had to come back in that July month. Everybody generally sees July as that's at least my summer month. Like I know nothing's going to get taken away there. We do start on the 8th, and that's some of those days I talked about giving back. So that's 7 days of school prior to the 3rd Monday. So there's 3 days extra there that the students would be able to keep. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So we've got that. We also start on a Thursday. Our elementary people have been asking for a long time if we could try, mid-ish week start, because it seems to go smoother for the elementaries especially. But I think middle and high, it helps out a little bit too, gives them some time to ease back into it. Moving along, we do have the early release day already right there on the 30th, just to kind of get the season going, which leads into our first holiday there. So it's not a full 4-day weekend, but I mean, it's a half day leading into a holiday. We get down another early release day in September, as well as a 4-day weekend in October for students, 3-day for staff. Going to September, we have the normal breaks there. We have the election holiday we got to have off, plus our Thanksgiving holiday. Get down in December, we get into winter break. Similar to other calendars, and we've done this in the past where we've had the workday on the 3rd, come back in, teachers roll the semester over. The reason for putting the workday on the 3rd instead of, say, on the 20th, that's how we got the perfect 90-90 and had the breaks in the earlier deal. If we put the workday on the 20th, we just end up rolling a day back to start earlier, and then teachers are coming back on the 31st of July. So it was a trade-off there. And some people have asked, why didn't you put it on the 6th? Same thing, to figure in all the breaks we have later. If you look down at the end of the calendar, if we do move that day down one, we would end up pushing and coming back with students one day after Memorial Day for the last day of school, which is obviously a wasted day if we do that. But again, if you look at the calendar, you'll see on this side over here, we go roughly no more than 4 to 5 weeks without hitting a break. We figured in a 4-day student, 3-day teacher weekend in February and March. We have spring break in April. And then, of course, we finish out school leading just before Memorial Day on the 23rd. So again, this one does not feature the remediation days, but it does feature everything else as far as the academic focus we like. Again, the breaks that are figured in there, the little bit earlier of a start, as well as the exams, which is the biggest one, to have the pure 90-90 semesters.
I have a Liza question, so maybe Gray will answer it. This school year, we moved to 5 personal days for staff. Can they take those on teacher work days?
Yes, they can. Yeah, I've been told that. I asked that question too. Was told the same thing.
There's a before and after
A holiday.
Yeah.
Permission, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, like you said, there's a handful of 3-day for staff, 4-day for student kind of long weekends. But if a staff wanted to make that a 4-day weekend, if that would be possible, then that makes that more appealing.
Yep.
Okay. Because they're not missing
Yeah, you'd
classroom
rather
time.
take it that day if possible than do it on a student day.
Okay.
For sure. All right, so questions about this calendar as compared to the other, or just in general, these are two calendars that either or we feel that the district could move forward with. So really tonight we're presenting 2 calendars to you. If you choose to vote either way, we feel that we have met the academic goals that we want to meet. No matter which way we go, whether it's the additional remediation or this, we believe both of these calendars will be able to help us get the academic goals we want to get through.
So there's no official recommendation by
Between the two, no. We are offering the 2 options for you guys. Now, we don't have to do that. You guys could say you want us to come back to you again with the final draft. But at this point, we have come up with 2 different modified drafts that both meet needs of the district. Neither is perfect, but they get us closer to where we want to be.
What I recall from the conversation 2 weeks ago were 2 things. One was trying to figure out how much it would cost.
Yes.
Which sounds like we have that now. And the other was some discussion about the practicality and benefits of remediation. And whether, not just financially, but, were we really looking to build in breaks, or were we really looking to build in remediation? I think that was kind of the fundamental question.
And I will say, from the 50 that I looked at, it was on the leaner side as there were ones that were using remediation. The ones that had 2 full weeks of remediation were definitely on the very low end. The ones that had maybe 1 day here, 1 day there, there was a couple of those. But I would say the vast majority of them had just breaks.
I think we talked also about of course, I bet you my quarter that we wouldn't have anything to remediate. That's just me. But we also talked about opening the elementary in August of 25. I don't know what this does to that, but you're interested in getting.
Well, actually, Joe and I looked ahead of that, and technically without remediation benefits us better on the 25-26 year, because you're finishing earlier here. You're finishing before Memorial Day, and you're adding some summer days back in if you go with this same calendar going into the 25-26 school year. Whereas the other calendar, you would go longer and you would start earlier on that side. So really you lose about a week-ish, week and 2 days. Yeah. Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah.
We're going to make it,
Yeah.
Joe.
Well,
We're going to make it.
Sounds like you have a recommendation, Joe.
I mean, what it can mean, though, in all seriousness, is we could vote on anything we wanted to today, but we could get to the summer of 24 and have to make a late late adjustment.
That's why every calendar I create has the subject to change at the bottom of it.
Yeah, that nobody sees.
And
That's true.
please know that if we were in that position as a district, we would look very favorably toward people who had already made plans as to far as
right.
penalizing them, and they've already paid for flights 2 years in advance or whatever it is.
Well, and I do think, and I will say this, and I'll be upfront, I think this district and our board and our staff have been very, very thorough in looking at developing these calendars. Like, I've seen a lot of the districts that basically developed this calendar really quick and got it in place for next year, and now they're starting to wonder, hey, did we put this correctly or not correctly or whatever? So I appreciate the fact that we're looking at this for 2 years out.
Well, and
It's
not urgent to do.
It's not urgent to do, but it also does make it a little bit tough because you're trying to, guess what we're going to have. We don't know what we're going to have, if we're going to have, a lot of people have signed up for mediation. We don't know, any changes that could happen. But, I think we've been very thorough in developing either of these two calendars.
Can I just, one thing I just noticed, but you didn't mention, or at least I missed it if you did, the one without remediation has students coming back on a Thursday, not on a
Yes,
Monday.
yes.
I know we've talked about that over the
Yeah,
years.
that's what I was just saying. The elementary is actually very happy to see that. That's something they've asked for, is to try to come back in that midweek.
How does that impact the staggered start? I know it's only one grade level, but how would that impact staggered
Well,
start?
we don't know that we're going to get stagger start. We have to apply for that this summer.
Extend it, Peter, we could go Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday on the stagger, just to give them their,
So they could still stagger.
still do it, yeah.
3 years that's come out in June, it's a year-to-year FISA, so we don't know year-to-year if we're
Okay.
gonna have it, but we just operate, instead of a Monday through Thursday, we do Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, start on.
Right.
Okay.
Which actually still starts everybody in the middle of the week. So,
Right.
That's right.
Right, okay.
So just out of curiosity, because when we polled parents and everything, we were kind of floating those remediation weeks / vacation if you thought your family didn't need it. And we did get, your
we did get
numbers
feedback, yes.
that looked like people were excited about having a week. But am I understanding that your team thought this was better with lots of little breaks because
Well-
then we're not coming back in July?
So this is a concession to a couple of things. Number one, starting later in the summer is a concession to the people, because it was funny, even the people who wanted the breaks didn't want their summer cut short.
Right.
Shocking, everybody wants everything
all
the
wanna
way it
be
works.
heard.
But
Yes.
it's also a concession to the largest amount of feedback we got from the parents is they weren't going to be able to figure out childcare for those remediation weeks.
Okay.
That was the largest complaint. Now, again, that complaint, if you take out the "it doesn't impact me" group, you're really only dealing with about 35% to 40% of the responses
But that's putting a
between all of them.
But,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at it, so the early start from a parent's was, if I take out the no impact, was
Yeah.
4% positive and 20% negative.
Exactly.
If I go to the staff, it was 2% positive and 25
Yeah,
to
they
30%
did
negative.
not like coming back in July
Okay.
at all.
And then on the having the additional breaks was parents, 23% positive, 18% negative. And then staff was somewhere between 20 and 30% positive, depending on the group, and 11 to 15% negative. So it,
I don't want to come back early, but I want to have those breaks.
But in fairness, they really didn't see this modified draft. They didn't judge
this
the
wasn't
modified
on,
draft
this wasn't out there.
for
Right.
mediation. Right, so they didn't see that they're
No,
not
they
coming
did.
back in July, the modified draft without.
Without remediation, no. They judged the one that had the one in it.
Correct. So in fairness, they don't want to come back in July, but they really didn't see that it's only 3 days in July, right? So you're,
No,
you're
they
trading
did.
off three days in July.
The
for
calendar that went
2
out had the 3 days in July that they would come back
They had this modified draft with remediation.
with remediation. Yes,
part of the
that's what was sent out as the survey.
The with remediation.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't.
No, without. I'm talking about the without remediation.
Well, yeah, but they're not coming back in July on this calendar either.
But what I'm saying is, if they haven't seen this calendar, they're coming back August 1st.
Versus July.
Right, versus July. So
Yeah.
when they see this, their opinion might change for 3 days for 2 weeks off in the middle of the year. Do you see what I'm saying? That could sway some things.
Sure. Yeah, I
Maybe,
agree.
Maybe our data isn't as accurate as we think it is
Well,
because
it was based on something different than
correct,
what this says.
correct.
I mean, I agree. We have to make concessions at some point. We can't every draft send out a survey and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?"
Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying
that
is
would
if
be
we're basing it off of feedback.
because we might send it to parents
I
and
don't
they're
know
going to
if it's
say that I don't like them being here at this point, or they do. So
I was strictly pointing out the benefits of the one that we had proposed.
Right.
And the drawbacks of what we had proposed. This obviously
I mean,
hadn't been out there.
I was just looking at it like, it looks like, to me, remediation, in my opinion, looks too expensive for what we can afford.
yes.
But I also was super excited about everybody else being excited about having a week of fall break. So I was just looking for perfection. But I mean, I don't hate your work. I just, but
Well, first off, to be honest with you, either of these counts. So to somebody else's point earlier about the personal, I'm working every day here, so I don't have a personal choice in these calendars.
So I don't care.
Like I don't. All I'm doing is saying this. Like these are drafts that are concessions to the feedback we got from the survey.
But Libby,
And that's so like so to Dr. Friarelli's point is, yeah, we could keep asking and asking and asking, but I'm not sure how we would ever reach a conclusion.
And that's not what I'm suggesting that we do. All I'm saying is if we're going to base a decision off of data, the data's not really wholly painting the picture of what they were surveyed on.
Well, yeah, this is the answer to the data. The data said I want this, and this is the answer to it.
Was created.
But Lippy, too, I do want to clarify something that you had said, that everybody loved having the week off, because that was why I was looking at it. It was roughly equivalent, positive and negative, 20 versus 18%.
Okay.
From a parent perspective. From a teacher, it was definitely more positive than negative. But even then, it was like 20 versus 12 and 30 versus, so it wasn't as overwhelming as I thought it would have been when I looked at the
Okay.
data. So most were unaffected, or most said unaffected. Maybe they didn't mean it, but.
So, I mean, for me, it kind of comes down to which is less complex. It looks like with the remediation, I just kind of made it just a quick little list of what potential issues could be. You nailed one, childcare. I think that's something that will come up. Obviously, if we have that week off, they will have to find something to cover cost of that. I also look at cost, kind of like what Lippy said. I think this is just from a cost analysis. Plus, and because I think what you've documented is pretty much a good expectation. Fluctuating on what we need for special needs, transportation, things like that. And then you're also dealing with staffing. We've also got to staff this thing. I also like the start date for the teachers. I think there is something psychological about having the whole month of July. That is your month off. Like that's you have that. So even just kind of starting in August is it's just like a fresh start. You know what to expect. So those were just some things that I line up with the. I'm kind of favoring without the remediation. I think this is a good structure, and also to highlight how you've put those 3-4 day extended breaks in there, and they're just kind of peppered in there very, very nicely. Yeah, I'm favoring that.
Thoughts, comments?
No, just looking for a recommendation.
Well, I would add one comment that I'd made to everybody before and made to you too, that with the remediation calendar, and I understand why we had picked the week we did, but it puts a week off over election week. And I think that gives me heartburn to do that, despite the fact that we have great opportunities to vote in advance. I don't have a lot of confidence that everyone will do that, and I think it could be a negative impact on our district
Agree.
and some topics that may be present there.
Yeah, I know there were reasons to put it there to make it work.
Right.
I think if you were to say, would anybody like a week off in the fall, it would not be the first week of November that they would ask for,
Man,
right?
I'm looking for October.
That too.
Right?
Yes.
So. And the same, well, anyway, sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the modified draft without remediation calendar as presented this evening.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the modified calendar without remediation as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, okay, you have a
Thank you very
calendar.
much.
Have a calendar.
There you
You
go.
know, and it's not perfect.
No.
And to your point, things could change in the legislature between now and then that would cause us to have to change it again.
There's
right?
always a solid chance I'll be back here before the 2024 day.
Yeah,
So
they won't change
Thank
it.
you.
It's more about how Department of Ed is gonna interpret it and
Yeah.
or
That's true
give
too.
a
It
pass,
does have to be
so-
approved by South Carolina Department of Ed,
Sort
so
of.
it won't, yeah.
But
Okay.
they're not making any guff
All
over
right.
any of the others.
That was fun.
I have a fun news flash to share.
Okay.
Catawba Ridge girls go into overtime to win 7-6
In the first of.
in the first of
Well, hopefully.
best 2 of 3 first day.
Now they gotta go to the other place.
Extra.
Well,
innings,
extra
not
innings.
overtime.
It's,
Um,
okay,
We
whatever.
are in
Thank you.
need of a second executive session to discuss personnel recommendations, contractual issues, and legal issues. Can I please get a motion to move into executive session?
Motion to go into executive session.
Thank
Second.
you. Thanks, everybody. That was fun.